call the meeting to order. Welcome to the regular board meeting of the Nevada Irrigation District Board of Directors, August 24th, 2022. If you'll all join me with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Secretary, call the roll, please.
Division 1? Here. Division 2?
Here.
Division 3? Here. Division 4? Here. And Division 5?
Here. Thank you. All right, first item is public comment on any item not on the agenda on today's agenda. If you'd like to speak to any item pertinent to Nevada Irrigation District business, star 9 on your phone or come to the podium. This is time. Okay, seeing none. We'll move on to special orders.
Jennifer, do you want to introduce?
I sure will.
Yes. Investment performance review for the quarter ending June 30th, 2022. Who's going to make it?
Chris, our mic's not working.
Mic's not working.
No.
Ah. Okay, I'll work on it.
We have Monique Siphon from PFM is going to provide a quarterly update on our investments. And I think Monique is on. Oh, there she is. Hi, Monique.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. As Ms. Hanson mentioned, I'm going to provide an update on the investments. It's good to be with you here once again. I'm going to share some materials and just have some fairly brief comments on the market to start, just to give you a sense of sort of where our focus has been as we started managing the district's investment funds and where we expect to go in the future. So just a couple of things to note. And as many of you know, the real focus in the economy has been the very high inflation that we've been dealing with through most of 2022. The Federal Reserve has taken fairly drastic action to combat that inflation by aggressively raising the overnight rate. It started calendar year 2022 at 25 basis points. It is now currently at 2.50%, which is a tremendous amount of movement, 225 basis points in a very short amount of time. That Fed funds target rate is expected to reach between 3.25% and 3.75% by year's end. Now, what does that mean for the district's portfolio? Well, one, it means that rates are expected to rise still more before calendar year end. So the approach we've taken with the district's assets thus far has been to really focus on short-term investments in the interim while we give the market some time to settle a bit. Now, along with the high inflation, the market has been also sort of bookended by a very strong labor market, especially on a national basis. Unemployment rate is 3.5%. The reason this is notable is because with the Fed aggressively raising those interest rates, there's been continued concern that the Fed is going to go too far and further push the economy into a recession. However, the labor market has held off some concerns by economists about that, essentially suggesting that the labor market is strong enough to weather the impact of those rising rates. Now, of course, along with that, we have depressed consumer confidence, which is sort of, as many of us know, consumers are the real drivers of the economy. As consumers continue to be depressed by the inflation news, by the cost of groceries, by the cost of gas, by general costs across the board, that could cause consumers to curb their behavior, could lower spending and GDP. So there is still great potential for a growing recession. All of those things are really sort of what's percolating in the economy. Now, the last sort of major bullet point I have here is that as a result of all these factors together, we've seen bond prices fall, equity valuations fall, Bond prices are falling, of course, because interest rates are rising. So you'll see some market value depreciation in the asset value of the portfolio. And equities, of course, are concerned about inflation, the recession, and the impact on companies. And as you've probably heard in the news, companies are starting to turn a corner by either doing hiring freezes, contemplating layoffs, and other things to build a bit of a war chest for that looming recession in the future. Other things that are notable for the district is because of this uncertainty in the market, commodity prices, labor costs, other things, we've seen wider credit spreads, which means we've been getting compensated more for purchasing credit instruments, and that would be commercial paper, corporate notes, other types of assets of that type. So headwinds. Question? Yes.
I have a question on the previous slide. It's the start of balance sheet reduction, pace to double beginning in September. Could you explain what that means?
Yeah, sure. So the Federal Reserve during the recession had stood in the market as what we call a reliable buyer of long-term debt. So they were purchasing long-dated mortgage-backed securities, long-dated other assets. And because they were a reliable buyer of those types of securities, they essentially sort of created a price floor on those securities. Investors knew that there was always going to be someone who was willing to buy that longer-dated debt. The Fed has now said that, that type of support for that market is no longer necessary. So they have sort of stepped back from that role. And what they mean is sort of doubling the pace of that is they're going to be buying less debt and allowing those longer term securities to sort of roll off and not add to that allocation.
And then when you say asset prices have fallen sharply, what assets are we talking about?
So we're talking about stock prices. We're talking about bond prices. So the assets in the district's portfolio, for example, and I'm just going to use round numbers for the purpose of example. If you had $100 million invested in the portfolio, at the beginning of the year, that 100 million sort of was 100 million. As interest rates rose, and again, they rose at this point from 25 basis points to where they currently sit at 250, interest rates rose 225 basis points. The value of that portfolio is now below 100 million because the price declines as interest rate rise. Essentially, the assets that you hold are worth less in the market because investors can buy other securities that are yielding higher income, higher interest rates. Now, that is just a function of the market. We expected that as interest rates are expected to rise. We expected market prices to decline. The good news on the other side of that is that we're able to also buy investments at much higher yields. So in some cases, we would look to actually dispose of some of the assets you currently have to reinvest in higher yielding securities because that income is going to more than make up for that depressed price.
I think I have a question.
Yes.
I find that the Fed to be rather timid, but compared to Paul Volcker, and a lot of economists are saying that they have to get the interest rate above the inflation rate to have any effect, and that's what Paul Volcker did. Are we looking at a Fed that might do that? Because
No.
then it's going to be up to 10%.
Yeah, I don't think that. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think the Fed has the stomach for that. It's been very clear that too little, too late at this point. Some aggressive interest rate movement last year may have been more helpful to sort of turn this tide, but it's very clear that the Fed has been watching the recession metrics, watching the concern around whether they are going to push the economy into a recession. And, from my view, in some instances, looking for reasons to be less aggressive than they already are at this point. So I would find it very surprising if they shifted their stance to be more aggressive than they currently are estimated to be. The market has its eyes on their symposium this weekend. We'll be watching to see what comes out of that as well.
So I have two other So your assessment of the possibility of stagflation, and then I look at something else. I look at trucking, because truck's my product. And trucking's starting to fall apart. And how would that affect our economy? And then also, supply chain issues are already pretty bad. I've seen trucking take down a president before in South America, and it didn't take them long, but a 1-week strike. And I'm talking to a lot of truck drivers, and they're about ready to give up. So how's that going to affect this market, or can we measure that?
Yeah, I think it's been very difficult to measure, in these metrics. For example, we talk about a strong labor market. And what I find fascinating about the unemployment rate is we're currently in this employment environment that I think hasn't quite settled yet from the pandemic, from the supply chain issues. We've had a drastic reset in society after the pandemic. And for better or worse, I think that's reset employees' expectations around what they want their work-life balance to be, how they wanted to be treated as employees, et cetera. And that hasn't quite made its way through the study, through economic theory, and quite frankly, through some employers in terms of how they handle employees. So you're seeing all these stories right now in the news and about, this quiet quitting phenomenon, which if you sort of dig down to that, it's really just a matter of, the office type employees saying, you know what, we're going to leave at 5. We're going to go home. We want to work from home. We want more flexibility than you've given us in the past. We're not willing to reset. Truck drivers are looking at sort of their conditions, what they're dealing with. We still have significant supply chain constraints that haven't really worked their way through, and that's what's exacerbating the inflation situation. Wages aren't rising fast enough in a lot of sectors to meet what's necessary to get those jobs done, and I don't think all of that has really worked its way through. So I think those are significant risks to the economic outlook, and I just don't think they're quite reflected in the numbers. Hey, any other questions on the sort of broad economic themes? Okay, seeing none. Headwinds, these are just sort of the things that are sort of lingering there in the background. Again, unemployment rate is low, but as I just mentioned, there are still a lot of factors related to employment that I just don't think are reflected in these figures. And I think it's going to take some time to work themselves out. As I mentioned, employers right now are looking at ways to stave off employee costs, looking at hiring freezes, potential layoffs, seeing what they can do with less. Consumer sentiment is down and remains down. Consumers are concerned about the things I imagine some of us are concerned about, the price of things, the employment outlook, work-life balance, et cetera. We also have retail sales has continued to be high and elevated, although I will note that some of this number could be elevated because the cost of retail is just simply higher, meaning that those figures may be artificially inflated a bit, reflecting higher prices. And existing home sales, I think, is just starting to feel the pressure. We're starting to see home prices decline as interest rates on the longer end of the yield curve has started to pick up a bit. Moving forward, just briefly, I already talked about the fact that the Fed is increasing interest rates through calendar year end. They are expected to continue increasing interest rates through 2023. And it's anticipated that by the end of 2023, going into 2024, the Fed may reverse course and actually start cutting interest rates. And I think this activity is more related to them getting back to their longer term interest rate estimate or preference, which is an inflation rate of about 2.5%. So they want to bring the Fed funds target rate back in line with that expectation. And to Member Hansen's question earlier about whether the Fed is going to look to be aggressively moving this rate up above 8%, it's unlikely based on where the FOMC participants have indicated. This chart we call the dot plot here at PFM Asset Management. Each of these dots in this 2022 represents one individual member of the Federal Open Market Committee and where they believe the target rate should be at the end of each of these years. And as you can see, the most aggressive outlook currently on these charts over the next few years is a meager 4.5%. Getting down to the nuts and bolts, what we're dealing with is the yield curve as represented here in the dark blue, which is where interest rates were at the end of the quarter, June 30th. And one thing that I will note about this is that you'll notice it's exceptionally steep in the short end of the curve, and that follows where we're expecting interest rates to be because interest rates are expected to increase for the next few quarters through the end of the year. Since the end of the quarter, interest rates have climbed higher still. The 2 years approximately 3.3% right now. So we're looking at reinvesting again in higher yielding securities for the district, and we find that very attractive. Now getting into a brief summary of the portfolio, we have about 91 million in the portfolio. You could see the average maturity distributed here. We have a majority of the assets sort of in this longer duration, and we have some below. You could see that the majority of the assets are federal agency securities, some commercial paper that we've added this quarter, and we also have some corporate notes and some time CDs. Our goals for the district's portfolio, as I've shared with you in a prior meeting, is to look to diversify this asset allocation. So we're going to be doing that. This quarter, we started with commercial paper, and we'll be adding other sectors as we move along. So I hope when we speak again, you'll see this chart in the upper right be a little bit more colorful than it is now. Here you can see the distribution of security types, essentially where you have the assets invested. Our goal is not only to make your pie chart or donut chart more colorful, but we also want to ensure that you have a good distribution of issuers. So we're always going to look to make sure that you are diversified. Getting into the specific portfolio that we're looking at, you can see that when we actually sort of get down to this allocation, you have a good amount of the securities in this portfolio, and this excludes your time CDs, are invested in fairly short yielding securities. So this is the allocation that we're focused on. As these securities in the 0 to 1 year area sort of roll down and mature, we'll be looking to invest them back out and give you a bit of a more diversified maturity structure for your securities portfolio. A couple of things to note, this is a good time for that because interest rates on the yield curve are so high. You can see that your yield at cost is 82 basis points and the yield at market is 305. What that means is that the historical assets in your portfolio are yielding 82, but the market opportunity is above a 3%. So everywhere we reinvest, we're reinvesting essentially at that sort of target 3% rate. And that's what we like to see in the current market. Yes, Member Johansson?
Hi, Monique. Any of the 3 to 4 and 4 to 5 portfolio candidates to be sold at discount and then reinvested? Is there any?
Well, currently, that's a great question. Because these securities are essentially have an average yield of 82, we'd likely sell these at a loss to reinvest at a higher yield. Right now, it's more advantageous to sell the securities in the 0 to 1 year bucket because those securities have less market value depreciation, are closer to maturity, and there's so many of them that it's sort of a better opportunity for us. And so that's the portion that we've been focused on for disposal and reinvestment.
Excellent.
We've already talked about this page, so I'll just focus on the activity. This quarter, I already mentioned, we focused on commercial paper just to start diversifying the portfolio a little bit. We purchased about 7 million of commercial paper in the portfolio. And as we go along, we'll be adding other asset classes to the portfolio. The interest earned so far was about $23,000 for the portfolio, change in amortized cost, a positive $42,000. When we meet again, or when you see another report from us, you will start seeing a total return performance reported, because we'll have one full quarter of performance between June 30th and September 30th. So do be on the lookout from us. The remaining portions of this deck is just informational material. We show the detail of securities held, so you can look through that at your leisure. We also show the time CDs. This is a portion of your portfolio that we are monitoring, but because these time CDs are less liquid, we're simply looking at them, monitoring them, and we'll reinvest these proceeds once they mature. And you only have about 1 million in these time CDs here. So that's all I have in terms of a formal presentation for the board. I'm happy to entertain any additional questions.
What's the timeline for I realize you're going to be making changes all the time to the portfolio, but we have a lot of changes, it sounds like, that you're anticipating in the near term. So how long do you think it will take to transition our portfolio from its current composition to a more balanced and lucrative portfolio?
Yeah, I would say that's a great question. I would say I would anticipate another 3 quarters for that transition. And so, we're starting here. I said you had about 62% of the portfolio of securities in that 0 to 1 year area. And I'd expect us to sort of start taking those allocations and reinvesting them slowly and steady. And that's going to go a long way to getting us closer to sort of a target, more diversified allocation.
And then just out of curiosity, why is it a kind of what I would call a measured transition, as opposed to saying, well, you've got a bunch of dogs, so let's move it all. So yeah. Why do you think that to do the measured approach? I'd just like to understand.
Yeah, no, that's another great question. Well, I think if we were to turn over the portfolio essentially all at once, we'd have to take a bunch of losses in one reporting period, and doing it over time allows us to sort of spread that over time. It also helps mitigate the risk that things change to the positive, or hedge against the risk that things change to the negative. So it gives us a little bit more options and allows us to sort of take a longer look at the market.
Nicely done.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Jennifer. I'm delighted to have a professional person or company, firm, managing our investments, and not in-house. It really makes a difference. It feels more secure, right? So thank you.
Yes, I have the utmost confidence in Monique and her team. As you know, I worked with them in Lincoln, and it's definitely an area of concern. So I was happy when they answered my call of help.
So thank you, Monique.
All right, great, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your days.
Thank you so much, Monique. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye, Monique.
Okay. Next item is the consent agenda.
Okay.
Hold on one second. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so we have 89 million invested, and that's our reserves, and that's how much of this is, portfolio is 89 million, so how much on top of that? I mean, do we use our operating funds out of this amount as well?
No, so we keep money in essentially 3 places. We keep it in more than 3, because we're still in the middle of banks. But for purposes of making it simple, we essentially have a checking account, a LAIF account, which is a local agency investment fund. PFM does not manage that. That is viewed as a public agency, essentially savings account. It's very low returns, and it's more a short-term kind of portfolio that you can pull money out of.
It's a buffer.
Yes, it's like a savings account. And
very
then,
low interest.
yeah, it's very, very low interest. It's usually like 1.5. It's pretty low. And then we have the remainder of the balance of our funds in investments. And so on a weekly basis, we do a cash analysis to determine, because we constantly have money coming in and going out. So we have a cash analysis on a monthly basis where we determine what money we're going to move to LAIF or pull from LAIF to pay, say, a big debt service bill, what money we're going to move to investments. And we have some minimums we like to keep on hand within our checking account as well as our LAIF account in the event there's some type of emergency. So from the purpose of what is this money, the all reserves, no, not necessarily. The money that is coming in and coming out, it's all pooled cash, right? So it's every fund's total cash amount, all basically accounted for in the bank accounts together. And then through our accounting, we determine every fund's proportional share of that total amount of pooled cash. So when we are going to make a large expenditure, some of the things we'll take into account is where we pulled money from. You know, if we need money to be pulled out of the investments, we work with the investment advisor ahead of time. So if they do have to, you know, start selling our parts of our account to be able to give us the money for, say, like a Scott's Flat spillway project, we can do that without realizing a lot of losses. But additionally, what goes into that conversation is it better to bond due to the debt service interest rates, or is it better to pull money out of investments? And so we kind of look at all of those holistically. We look at it on a very short-term weekly basis, and then we look at it on a long-term basis to figure out the most advantageous way for the district to pay for these large projects. But it's a constant watching of money, seeing what we have, estimating what we have coming out. When we have big debt service payments, and then we also get 2 huge revenue payments from property tax payments twice a year. So we kind of have to time all of that out and watch it over time.
So what would be our balance in our typical average balance in our LAIF account and our checking account?
Yeah, we keep about between 7 to 12 million in LAIF, and then we usually keep $2 million in our Wells Fargo account, which is where we run payroll through, and then we'll keep about $5 million in our other checking accounts, essentially. Once we go back, pardon?
What other checking accounts?
So we currently have Wells Fargo and we have Bank of the West. And then there's a couple of weird ancillary things that are nominal amounts that don't necessarily matter all that much. Once we go back through the banking transition, we'll be getting rid of Bank of the West, and the preponderance of our daily cash will be kept in Bank of the West. So for example, Wells Fargo. So for example, with the last giant revenue payment, I also knew we had a big debt service payment coming up, so I didn't move a bunch of money around. I utilized the large payment of revenue coming in to pay off that debt service.
Director Heck.
Thank you. Jennifer, so I see that, you know, the interest that we've made off of this is not all that great so far, but have we evolved to where we can attribute that interest to the various business lines, you know, hydro? Okay.
Yeah, so the interest revenue, will be distributed proportional amongst the funds based off of their particular fund balance.
Right.
So the fund balances in hydro are the highest right now, so they get the preponderance of the revenue, and then it's divided between water and recreation of a very, very small amount. But that is the typical way that you do investment revenue is by the pool cash.
That before, so I knew you were transitioning, so I was trying to just find out where we are in that process.
Yes, so that's being done. So previously, and it was per policy, and there is a lot of issues with the actual policy and the legalities of it. With the Water Fund 10 paying for all the overhead costs, essentially what they did to kind of offset it, which doesn't really work from a Prop 218 perspective, is that they would assign all of the investment revenue to the water fund. It's not so problematic with hydropower necessarily because it's not subject to Prop 218, but it wasn't actually covering hydropower or recreation's fair share coverage of the overhead costs. So it wasn't doing what it was actually supposed to be doing, and that's a little bit problematic. So we've addressed all of that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Director Transon, did you raise your hand too?
I'm good.
You're good? So we went back.
We went to consent agenda.
We went back to the, Yes.
Yeah, you can take public.
But I also have a consent agenda,
Okay,
item.
I'll get you. All right, so anybody like to comment on our investment performance review that we just had? If you'd like to comment on that, start on your phone or step to the podium. Okay, seeing none, now we'll move to the consent agenda. Director Johansson.
Yeah, I believe Hanson Brothers, Hansen, and it's written SON.
It's because that's the better way to spell it.
You know, us SENs are very sensitive.
Our O's are very.
I never know which way it is. I know.
Yeah, we will correct it. They're probably just brainwashed by me.
So that was your comment
Yeah.
on the consent agenda.
And Chip Close wasn't at the August 9th, Answer Water meeting.
Yeah.
He was there.
He was online.
Oh, he was on,
Uh-huh.
oh, Armin. Okay. And then, I have some questions about the, Squirrel Creek, 4B.
So we're gonna pull 4B
Yeah.
and
4D.
4D,
4C, I'm sorry, I think, no, 4D.
4D.
Okay,
Okay,
anybody else?
No.
We have a,
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda, items 4A, 4B, 4C, and 4D.
I'll second. Madam Secretary, call the roll, please.
Division
oh,
I gotta do public comment. Any public comment on the consent agenda as proposed? Start on your phone. Okay, now, Madam Secretary.
Division 4? Aye. Division 1?
aye.
Division 5?
Yes,
Division 3? Aye. Division 2?
All right. Okay, Director Chambers.
Okay, on the Squirrel Creek, on the budget, it says, staff does not anticipate the entire contract being completed this year. So the contract's for $843,197, but we only have $797,150 in that account, or in that project, total cost. So it does not anticipate spending, therefore it's not recommending a 2022 budget amendment. But my understanding was that we're moving to this accrual method of accounting where the revenue or expenses are recorded when the transaction occurs versus when the payment is made. And so how does that work?
Yeah, so that, we already practiced accrual accounting, and it's actually it's when the invoice is received, not when the contract is executed. And so, no, it's not. So accrual accounting is based off of when an invoice is dated and received, not when the contract.
The invoice
Yes.
from the contract.
Yes.
right.
So in the new, how we will be proposing the capital program this year, for example, Squirrel I can't say it.
2 E's.
Squirrel Creek will cross fiscal years, and so you'll be seeing it basically reproposed in the proposed capital program for 2023.
Right.
So a lot of contracts, so you can have a contract term, for example, like an on-call contract. You could, for example, have a $300,000 3-year on-call contract for whatever, fence building. And you can budget for it and essentially encumber the funds on a year-by-year basis in less than what the actual contract is. So they're very different vehicles for securing legal contractual requirements of the contract versus encumbering funds through the accounting system.
So we could potentially have something happen, I mean, that's very hypothetical, because we don't have money, but then we say, oh, we don't have the money next year for whatever reason, some catastrophe came up or whatever. Then we
Good.
just say, sorry about your luck, we're terminating the contract and we can't finish it.
Yeah, you absolutely could.
All right, well, thank you.
What usually happens, that doesn't typically happen. Now, if we ran on super dire times, yeah, we can say we're terminating the contract, we're not gonna continue with this work. What typically happens is the rollover projects are obviously funded first because there's construction and project process.
So this isn't really that different than the way the former manager ran it, because they did this as well, saying, like this money each year for a contract?
Not necessarily. There were more kind of phantom projects that went multiple years back. And that's one of the issues we're dealing with now, is kind of these long-term, 3-4 year phantom projects. So, for example, we order a bucket truck in 2019, and, right, and it's still not showing up, and it's not being refunded in the capital program every year. So it's kind of more of a phantom style. How we're doing it now is how every agency does it. It's completely normal.
All right. Well, then I move to approve all these.
Second.
So I had a quick question. 43 active, 16 inactive, and yet the pipe will have enough capacity to serve all 43 and 16.
Absolutely. We base it on our current master planning.
Right.
So it's a 24-inch now. We're going to keep it at 24. We don't see a need to upsize it, and we still got plenty of capacity.
And there's more potential customers out there?
Sure, there's always potential customers that aren't currently connected to the system. It's not a moratorium, I don't believe, in that facility. So if somebody wanted to come in, they can get that, and there's still capacity in this pipeline to do that.
An inactive customer, one that has a box formerly and they're not using it now?
I think it's they're paying for the box, but they're not getting any water. Correct.
And wells are somewhat going dry?
In that particular area, I do not know.
Is our current master plan the 2011 raw water master plan?
That's the current numbers we're using until we update it after we do correct. A lot of these canals, we probably won't see a big change in those, but obviously, once we get through the plan for water, then we would update the raw water master plan. And then if that did potentially change, then we'd have to deal with it. But at this point, that's the information we have to go off of.
And by updating the raw water master plan, are you saying that that's the, I think it was chapter 8 that we never did the Siphon?
Correct. That's the actual project stuff related to it. So, yeah, so, no, so we would update the master plan in general. So we'll go back and, once we do the plan for water and have our new tools available and our new band information, we'll go back and actually review the first sections and determine, do we need to change what the flow is in the canal and the individual canals like we have already in that raw water master plan. So we would do that part first and then go back again to section 8.
One more comment, I'm happy to see a local contractor get the job.
Me too, always.
Yeah.
I bet they're.
I'll call Jeff and apologize.
Okay, questions from the board? Any public comment on this item? Squirrel Creek site replacement project. Consent agenda. Start on your phone or come to the podium. All right, I think we have a motion in a second.
Division 4? Aye. Division 1?
Yes.
Division 5?
Yes.
Division 3? Aye. Division 2?
Aye. Thank you very much. All right, general order number 5A. Grand jury report response. It says to consider and attach draft response. Consider means to talk about it, look at it.
Yes. I have a brief presentation, so just to aid in facilitation of this discussion, I just threw some of this into a PowerPoint. It's all included in the presentation. There's a couple of things I wanted to note before we got started off. So when we started responding to the grand jury report, typically you receive response submittal directions formally from the grand jury. So I was working off of the report that was issued that was available on the grand jury's website. And then I realized I had never actually seen the transmittal letter with the response directions. So Chris reached out to the grand jury for us, and they actually forgot to send it to us. So what we did is they were kind enough, the new foreperson did hand deliver a copy, and he was very nice about it. And he did indicate that our 90-day response should be based off of August 18th, 2022. But we're going to be done in plenty of time. So, no harm, no foul. But now we do have the correct transmittal information. So just please note the judge identified on the response will be being changed per their direction. Okay. There we go. So essentially, the state law requires that entities respond to a grand jury based the findings as well as the recommendations. And you are essentially required for the findings to state whether you disagree, partially disagree, or agree with each finding, and then whether or not you will be implementing the recommendations and the time for them. And my experience with grand juries, we submit the report, we make our determinations regarding the findings and as well as the recommendations, and then we submit our report timely manner to the presiding judge that's over the grand jury. Does anybody have any questions regarding the actual process?
I have a question. You said that the judge was changed because the date was changed?
I believe Dustin probably knows better than me that the presiding, am I saying that word right, am I?
Presiding judge.
Presiding judge for the grand jury rotates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By date?
By term, grand jury term.
Yeah, it's an annual appointment, and so probably the initial release was presiding judge A, and then because of the lapse, it just naturally changed. It was.
So they didn't send the transmittal letter?
Right.
Okay, I understand.
So the initial finding from the grand jury was there is a significant disparity between the cost for raw untreated water sold to Grass Valley, Nevada City compared to the cost to agricultural customers. And we could actually change this because the finding is correct. There is a difference. Yeah, so we can actually change that if the board would like. We agree that there is a difference, but there's a reason for the difference. So currently, the cities of Grass Valley, Nevada City, we are considered a supplemental water supply to those cities, and they call on us on an as-needed basis. And we do have contracts with both cities regarding their ability to purchase what we refer to as surplus water. One of the reasons, there's a couple of reasons for the difference in the cost. The primary reason being that they're out of district. And so they are not a traditional ratepayer and are not subject to the Prop 218 process as the rest of our ratepayers are. Additionally, they do not contribute property tax revenue to the district, as well as it is of our opinion that they should not be able to benefit from the hydropower revenue that the rest of the ratepayers get to benefit because they're not actually part of the district. So that does explain the disparity in the cost. But once we go through our new Prop 218 process, we'll be able to relook at those rates and see if they're appropriate and whether or not they require adjusting. Yes.
Offhand, how much would they save by joining the district service?
That's a very complicated question.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah, so that's an extremely complicated question to answer because there's a lot of talk. Okay, so the question was how much would those two cities and their ratepayers save by coming into the district? And it's an extremely complicated question because there are a couple of major hurdles, and I've actually spoken with both city managers about it. From a fundamental level, I think that we're open if they would like to come into the district. But it's one of those things that's easier said than done. So a couple of things that they have to take into consideration, and so as well with the district, is would they have to pay any type of capacity fee to pay for their fair share portion of the infrastructure that they have never had to pay for? That's one question. The second question is there would be an issue of property tax sharing. So they are really small cities, and every single penny of property tax is extremely important to a city because those are the funds that pay for police, fire, libraries, sometimes parks. So those are kind of the big questions. And then what do they do with their existing system, right? So do we absorb their system? Do they keep their system from the treatment plant and keep the ratepayers? Who collects rates from the ratepayers? So it gets very complex very fast. It's my opinion, a lot of people, I have heard rumors that NIT won't let them into the district, and it's not that at all. I've made it clear to both city managers if they would ever like to sit down and really try to hash this out. I'm just certainly open to those conversations. I think it's just pretty much it's a monumental effort that nobody has had the desire to do so yet.
Or the bandwidth.
Or the bandwidth, yes.
So follow up on that question. One, if they are in the district, then they go to the top of the line for priority. For what? Because it's residential.
So,
Two, oh, go ahead.
Well, I did want to address that. So technically, they are surplus customers. I can tell you, though, if they run out of their own water supply and they need water, the state would make us, we're not going to let towns go dry, right?
And no argument.
Yeah.
But last year they,
Can I?
hang on a second.
But this was connected.
Yes, it is too. So, but last year they had to go to a 30% rationing in Nevada City.
That was their own choice.
That was their own choice but that's what they're facing. They're looking at more rationing than full complement of water. And I guess my three-part, during the Prop 218 process, they're taking advantage of our capacity already. So that has to be that charge has to be in there also.
We will address, and when we revisit all the Prop 218, we'll readdress all rates and fees and take a good look at them.
Yeah, except, and then the fourth point is, at this point, they have no vote on how
Correct.
NID is run.
And they're not in the Prop 218.
Their rates are based off of the original Prop 218 rates, and then there's essentially a surcharge that's placed over the top of them. Once we reevaluate our Prop 218 rates, that'll serve as a new basis for any additional rates, and we'll take a deep look at their rates.
Okay, this is a great discussion, but I think we're off the topic.
Yes.
Of answering this question. And I think we've talked about it a lot before. I have some questions about it right now, but I think it'd be more appropriate at an agendized time to do that if we want to on this particular subject. I agree with changing the response to the finding to agree with the
Okay.
caveat.
We will do that.
That's the end of that discussion?
As far as I'm concerned, as far as this topic on the agenda, that I.
The grand jury findings, there's disparate water charging?
Our discussion about, talking about the pros and cons and all that is not pertinent to this discussion at this time. And I'm happy to agendize it any other time. I think there's a lot to it. There's, what are the cost benefits and all those kinds of things.
I would recommend, that is a real weighty topic, and it will take a lot of staff time. I'd recommend we park that till a later date. We have some really full plates right now.
Well, and plus there isn't the will. I mean, both of those cities are my division, and I talk to them all the time, the leadership, and there just isn't the will to move that forward at this time. So for us to spend a lot of work and staff time when on the other side, they're not ready to move, it doesn't make any sense.
Agreed.
I agree. And so that forces us that every year we have to declare surplus water. So what other sources does Grass Valley have? You said Grass Valley has other sources of water?
Yeah, it's my understanding they have wells as well as their own water rates.
Not enough supply.
Not enough to supply, so they would run out of water every year.
And so that kind of makes our surplus water declarations kind of sticky.
It is, it's a sticky situation, because like I said, from a health and safety perspective, there is, in my opinion, not gonna be a time when we can just not provide them water, so.
And to put severe restrictions on our customers, are they putting severe restrictions on their customers?
They do. They are very good at putting restrictions on their customers. And remember, their customers are primarily treated water customers, so their water use is fairly nominal in comparison to our large amount of raw water use. They've been very good about putting on water restrictions. In fact, they make a phone call prior to the big watering season every year and tell us what they're gonna do and basically request input if they wanna do, if we would like them to do anything more. So they've been really good partners.
I haven't seen any signs for the California mandate of 20% though. Last year you go to Nevada City, you see 30% everywhere.
Yeah,
But this year you don't see 20%. You don't see it in the papers.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not up to speed on their outreach campaign. All right.
Or lack of.
Are we ready for finding two?
Yes.
Okay. So finding two states, NID cannot sustain the current subsidizing of low agricultural rates from internal reserves. So we fundamentally disagree with this finding because we're not actually subsidizing irrigation rates with reserves. Our reserves have remained static. They have not been moving based off of agricultural rates. However, I do agree that through the Prop 218 process, we need to reconfirm the cost to provide service to all the agricultural and raw water customers. We do not have an agricultural rate. Remember, we are an irrigation district, and per the water code, irrigation water has a fairly broad definition that Dustin's more well to speed than I am. And we do not have a rate just for agriculture. So currently, we allow for irrigation, raw water customers to sign up for raw water based off of any irrigation use that is a beneficial use that meets the definition of the water code.
Could we have separate
He's a good
rates?
teacher. Could we, you know, this is that is a long conversation that needs
It's all pertinent to F2.
Yeah, so let me,
But that's why-
I do want to just provide a little bit of just a quick feedback. Dustin and I have had a lot of conversations about the ability or the inability to provide different rates amongst raw water customers. It is a very legally sticky issue that we definitely need to do a way deeper dive on than we currently have. You know, in my mind, previously, it does seem that there's more flexibility with property taxes as well as hydropower revenue. But to Dustin's point, you know, there is something that is referred to as the public trust, and the assets of the district are held in public trust. So that is a question that I don't think either one of us is prepared to answer with any type of certainty, and it needs a lot of legal review for us to be comfortable making any type of recommendation.
I think it's a discussion we need to have next time we pick up rates.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, we're just earmarking them.
And the grand jury noted that the Nevada County ranked 54th out of 58 counties in agriculture production. Do we know what percentage of placer agriculture we have?
We would have to look it up. We didn't look it up as part of
Don't
this.
track that.
And I would say the ag commissioner has trouble getting people to respond
Well, I don't know that,
in
I
Nevada
mean,
County.
it wasn't we that tracked that, it was the grand jury that
Right.
found that
It's
information.
ag commission,
Yeah.
Yeah, and those numbers are not right.
Yeah, I'm unclear where their source was on those numbers. And also recall, we don't overlay all of Placer County, so it would be difficult to ascertain what portions of agricultural parcels were within the district or not without doing a larger analysis.
Those numbers are voluntarily given to the ag commissioner, and a lot of people don't report them.
Right. Okay, any more questions on finding two? Any more questions on finding two? All right, moving along. Finding three.
Can I just say my pet peeve on this is they come out with this statement, where in the heck did they get this? I mean, it's like, you interviewed
All
NID
three-
people, you
all three of
NID,
these,
yeah,
right?
you
All
NID, you interview board members. Nobody says this, but they put it as a finding, which is what the public perceives to be true. And that's a problem.
That's the problem.
So anyway, I just said it, I don't have to say it again,
I'm gonna
but
bring
it's
it up when we do two.
Yeah, so this is one of the difficulties with grand juries, right? There isn't a high level of burden of proof of making findings or substantiating legally recommendations. And so it really is a volunteer group. They do take a lot of their personal time to volunteer for these efforts, and some good things come out of them, right? It makes you think about things more. Some of the recommendations end up to be valid. I tend to choose to not get too wrapped up in the things that may have limited factual basis, because they are very limited in their ability to interview people. And then, you know, they're really taking a snippet of conversation from, you know, person A, person B, person Z, and then they're trying their best to come up with a finding. So I agree, you know, this could have been an offhand comment by any one of us, maybe taking out context that needed a little bit of a deeper dive. I frankly don't know.
Should we do Karen, are you asking for a NID finding of the grand jury?
I don't think that would be appropriate.
I want to say, I was
No,
consoled.
it's not appropriate, of course, but
In
that's,
this process, I'm consoled that we have the opportunity to disagree, not implement. So it's not a binding thing.
No.
More working together with them, although I agree 100% when I read this first thing, where'd they get all this stuff, right? They go, oh, but they're asking us, are we going to implement this or not? So we have a part, we have a part of the
right. I think the problem is that public perception, they catch the
Correct.
first splash. So from a process point of view, it's not that, here's what our draft findings are, let's get it right. It's, here's the findings, and from my conversation with people on the street is, that's what they remember. And the question is, will they ever see the secondary response? And I think the majority of times, they don't. And that's the damage that's done, to our reputation and, to the truth. I mean, if we have problems in areas for correction, absolutely, that's very appropriate. But if you don't even have the facts right, and you could have obtained the facts, but the process doesn't allow it, then it's a flawed process, and it hurts our reputation. So,
Where does this go? What happens with this?
So basically, if it gets filed and it gets submitted to the presiding judge, and then it essentially just gets uploaded on their website. Every once in a while, you'll see a grand jury do, you know, what's a decade review?
They revisit their.
Revisit it every decade and see who implemented what.
There's no, yeah.
Yeah, there's no teeth to it.
There's no teeth, there's no enforcement.
And it's difficult, right? So the grand jury, it's volunteers who may or may not have any expertise in the subject matter that they are reviewing. They may not have any legal background. They receive very little legal advice from the county attorney overseeing the process. It's pretty typical, but like I said, I do find benefit in that it makes you think about things a little bit more, maybe reminds you of some things you can improve on, and sometimes the recommendations are worthwhile.
I hate to do this.
No.
Can we move on?
No. So on number one,
We're on to number two.
We're on
yeah,
number two.
except they wrote it wrong. And we agreed that.
We changed it to agree.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, what do you want to do?
We agreed to that our costs for water sold to Grass Valley, Nevada City compared to the cost, there is a significant difference between the cost of the water, our cost, that we sell to Nevada City, Grass Valley, and what they're trying to talk to in number two is rates. And I think that's what they meant in number one, is that we sell, our rates of the water we sell to Grass Valley and Nevada City are higher than what to the raw water agricultural customers. But our costs are higher too.
Higher cost.
Our costs are higher to Nevada City and Grass Valley.
Our revenue is lower.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more of it's a revenue issue
So I
as
just wanted
opposed
to
to
bring that up,
expenditure.
that they're mixing and matching costs versus rates.
They are. There's a lot of conflating of issues in these.
There is.
So I'm not sure.
What about we change it to partially agree? Okay.
I just don't know how you want to work that, because
Oh.
costs and rates, and they keep going back and forth.
Yeah, let me address it, and we'll do partially agree. Okay, so finding 3, are we ready?
Yes.
Okay. NID cannot financially continue to provide low-cost agricultural water to customers who do not produce an agricultural product. So we disagree with this finding, and for the same reasons we already referenced. So in the water code, irrigation water has a very broad definition of use, and our raw water customers are required to have a beneficial use that's consistent with that definition. We are not able to say we will not sell water to non-agricultural products. No. And then additionally, it does also propose a Prop 218 issue, is that there is no measurable cost difference between providing raw water to somebody who has just lawn versus somebody who has a farm. So, we disagree with the finding. I think it's a noble finding, if it were true, but unfortunately, it's a little bit more complex. Does anybody have any questions?
Nope.
Finding 4.
Good.
Okay, NID has no requirement for consumer of raw untreated water to produce an agricultural, what?
Yeah.
No, same one. Yeah, same, the finding is correct. We do not, for the same reasons previously explained. I was almost confusing myself. Finding 5. Failure to adequately increase water rates is creating a significant disparity in costs of operation between the treated and untreated raw water rates. Now, I just want to make one note. So in the packet, we disagree with the finding, and I accidentally cut and paste the agree with the finding portion. So I am hereby changing my recommendation to disagree with the finding. Yeah, it was a cut and paste issue. Finding 5.
I have a question on 4.
Oh. Okay, 4.
Go ahead.
So it says that NID where all customers are required to report to NID what irrigation waters will be used for and how much acreage will be irrigated. This is after the annual crop report.
Where are we at?
Number 4, finding 4. Finding 4.
She's looking at our draft response,
Finding
Oh.
4.
page 19.
Yeah, page 1. Do we ever go out and confirm that what they're saying they're irrigating is what they're irrigating?
No.
Ever?
That would be extremely costly, very labor intensive, and,
Spot one, you could do, but
I'm not sure, maybe it's something to consider through the plan for water process, but we currently do not do that. Okay, so where were we at?
We do take customer service calls on it, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
but they don't.
So that's kind of a check and balance.
Not if we don't check it?
No, we do.
Well, I think you also have to look at the value, right? The allowable use underneath the water code definition for irrigation water is extremely broad. It's unlikely that there is widespread use that is not consistent with that definition. And so the value of doing an annual audit on agricultural use probably is somewhat diminished based off of the ability to allow for multiple uses, unless you have a different opinion.
I agree.
Okay, so we were on 5? Like I said, we disagree with this finding. This, that's a pretty broad statement. I think many of us kind of feel that it might be that way, that there is a disparity in cost, but there's a couple of things to note. Treated water does require a very large difference in costs of operation just because it has treatment plants involved, right? So there's significant labor associated with operating and serving treated water. There are also more maintenance issues because treated water mains break quite often. There's service issues. So, we disagree with the finding, but this is something we're going to look at in the Prop 218 process to make a better determination.
So there was a cost of service study done,
Correct.
but using the old accounting method,
Correct.
I have no faith in.
Correct. And I as well would feel more comfortable if we redid it. So that will be the plan during the new Prop 218 process.
Yeah.
Okay, finding 6, NID board has placed the district at financial risk by failing to raise the rates of raw, untreated, or agricultural users. This also has a modification. This was actually a disagree. This was my cut and paste issue.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah.
So this is disagree also.
Yes, this is disagree also. So this was a cut and paste problem. I was doing a quick fingers.
Jen, can we, because I was really concerned about this, because there's like an allegation.
Correct.
We are at financial risk.
Yeah.
And I would like this to be beefed up, our response, to say the district is not in financial risk.
Yeah, I can say
You know
that.
what I mean?
I think that's a good point.
Yeah, it was really bugged me that they did that.
Yeah, so financial risk for any type of public agency is based off of a number of different factors. A lot of them have to do with your level of reserves, your asset valuation.
You're not in any
and that.
financial risk.
No, we
And
can compare it to historical.
So
to allege that was just irresponsible.
Well, I think maybe what was likely the intent was we have a lot of financial obligations that may not have adequate funding right now, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're at financial risk. So I can beef that answer up.
Thank you.
Okay.
but it's not actionable, is it?
So findings are not necessarily actionable, and we're going to be reviewing all the rates.
Right.
I meant the other way. I mean, you can't go around saying fire in a crowded, theater, and you can't go around saying we're at NID's about ready to financially collapse.
Yeah, it's not true.
Dude, it's not true, but they're putting that perception out there and it's doing us damage.
Well, this is typical with granted, so there is basically no real legal recourse to grand jury reports. You can only just refute their findings and decline their recommendations and try to put the truth out there.
But somebody needs to be held accountable over there.
There really is no legal way to hold them
The judge
accountable.
can't come
No.
down and say, hey, you
No.
really messed this up.
Not at all.
And maybe has to be a social, no.
So in my experience,
Media post on your Facebook.
Yeah, there you go.
I would highly recommend we take any positive light that we can out of this that really is in line with the district's vision of how great we want to be in the future, and just leave the dark stuff behind, because there's nothing you can do about it.
We are, don't worry.
Okay.
We just can voice our opinion, that's our job.
Well, you also have to be mindful that grand juries watch
I hope they're watching.
board meetings, but they also a lot of times serve on future grand juries.
Right.
Well, they better not make the same mistake.
They often will. Okay, finding 7. NID failed to follow statutes in the California Elections Code during the reapportionment process in 2019-2022. So we disagree with this finding. So I think one of the issues with the grand jury findings is essentially that they are misinterpreting what the election code states. So with the election code, and we've confirmed this with several attorneys as well as other practitioners, as well as our consultant who has done hundreds of redistricting, the proposal to modify the districts is the trigger for the public meeting. Any particular map is not a new proposal. It's the action of modifying the actual district. So that was one issue that came up. So we actually have 6 meetings as opposed to the 1 required prior to the public hearing. As well, so between 19 and 22, there were 6 meetings. So there was 4, Grace, do you recall?
I think
3 prior to the public hearing to adopt the map this 2022. And then in 2019, there was another 2 meetings that discussed the actual proposal. So in the 2019 effort, this is prior to my tenure here, the effort was started and stopped. And this kind of does go into finding number 8, that the grand jury found that the board placed NID at legal jeopardy of lawsuit by failing to heed NID's legal counsel advice regarding reapportionment during the 2019 process. So at that time, the district did have some legal risk for not doing the reapportionment as it was intended in 2019. But the legal risk was no higher than it was in 2011. So redistricting is required based off of any new census. The census came out in 2010. So the district was in the same legal jeopardy, if you want to even refer to it as that, from 2011, once the census was issued, till 2019.
I have a comment about that.
So it also should be noted that at the time, in kind of the 2019 timeframe, you did find many public agencies were going through this frantic redistricting process. And it was essentially related to the fact that there was a kind of ADA-type lawsuit guy in California that was going around and filing lawsuits against any city, county, whoever, that was essentially had not redistricted, didn't have districts, and there was disparate impacts amongst essentially a protected population. It was very unlikely that this district would have been subject to one of those lawsuits, and there's a couple of reasons for that. And so what would happen when, per the code, when the individual any individual brings forward a lawsuit, but in this instance, it was really basically one guy, one firm that was doing all of the same. He sends you a letter, demands for curing of the districting, and then you essentially have to go redistrict immediately and pay like a $45,000 ransom. And I had to do this in Lincoln. Some agencies, many agencies, especially special districts, they just didn't jump based off of this looming threat of the lawsuit guy, because, at that point he was targeting mostly cities and counties. There were some legal risks. You could have to kind of pay the ransom to get out of it. But he really wasn't at that time going after water districts. I can't say that I would have recommended we start the 2019 redistricting if I was here, because the new census was coming out in 2020.
That was the whole reason for stopping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, although we partially agree with the finding, there was some legal risk. In my opinion, it wasn't any greater than it had always been.
My gripe with the wording is, sorry to jump into your question, but they said we only had 3 meetings, and they didn't acknowledge we even had a public hearing, and nobody, not one single public person, commented at that time. So,
That's right.
This thing that we didn't have enough meetings, we didn't do enough, yeah, we did it all.
Yeah, I'm comfortable where we're at. There's no case law that indicates that the, reference to the proposal to modify any district boundaries is actually specific to any particular map. It really is to the actual process of modifying the boundaries. So I'm comfortable where we're at. You know, you could always become case law, of course, right? But this is the typical process that most special district cities and counties follow.
So on finding F8, that's where we are. And once again, they have an allegation here that I take strong disagreement to, and that is, we place the district in legal jeopardy by failing to heed our legal counsel's advice during reapportionment. And, you know, I would like to say, well, we disagreed with that. We did not fail to heed our legal counsel's advice.
What if I put a sentence on, another bullet at the top?
Well,
Legal counsel.
No, they didn't talk to me.
No.
They must have reviewed the audio or the
they reviewed the
recording.
Yeah, I'm not clear either.
So,
Well, I do think Rich is right, though, that makes a statement about the board's kind of irresponsibility that we would go against our legal counsel. And
Right.
when, especially, I mean, when did we do that? When did we do that?
I
I'd
don't
like to know.
I don't remember,
Oh, then-
I don't remember us
They
going.
doubled down, yeah. They doubled down on the next one.
can I, am I able to, make a comment on my particular experience around this issue? I didn't think so. Anyway, you know, once again, this is an irresponsible allegation. It wasn't true. They have simply no proof that it was true. And for them to harp on this is bad. And I would like to strongly disagree that we went against our legal counsel's advice. Because you're right, that's what they're saying. They're saying, you know, we were a bunch of whatever, you know, it was the Wild West or something.
From the bar.
So let me do this. I recommend that I verify that there was no statement, and Dustin, you might recall, I don't know what the 2019, if, you know, it could have been said in 2019, well, you've started, you should continue. I don't know.
No, because I was there, Chris was there, Laura was there, and the issue was, this is an expensive process.
Right.
What are we doing? The census is gonna be in a year, and then COVID happened. So that's kind of why this got delayed a little bit from, you know, the census was delayed.
Right.
But it had, so we were all here, we all took a vote, Dustin was here, and we made a motion that said we table this, until after the 2020 census. That's how this went, and this is just simply dead wrong. So I take exception to partially agreeing.
Okay, let me see if we can't, Dustin and I can't work together to craft some language.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah, one of
I
the
have
things
more
I
of
found
these,
in it
by the
was
way.
that the consultant from before the 2019, which I had forgotten, was that 30, whatever the amount was that we paid that consultant was to do it in 2019, and then also in that scope of work was to true it up once the 2020 came out. That was something that I had missed in that exchange. And that was part of that initial contract. And so that's.
So you-
I don't remember that.
I don't remember the.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, so the election code doesn't allow for formal true-up, right? So
Right.
you would essentially be going through redistricting
And we
again.
have to do it again.
I mean, the consultant, yeah. The consultant might be able to cover the work for the true-up, but you're officially going through the
And
redistricting.
that was in the contract.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I did not read the
Well,
2019
because
contract.
the motion and what was voted on was for tabling it. It wasn't like, oh, contract, maybe we should do this, blah, blah, blah. It was, no, we're not doing it. Yeah, so, you know, it was very definitive.
Okay, we will, take a look at the statement a little bit closer.
We'd like to take a short break right now.
Can we?
No,
Can we, Mom,
Chris,
Audio thing. The public has not heard us the last 5 minutes.
Oh, no.
Oh, so finding 10, I'll just restate it, for the public since we were offline there.
We need to go back to.
Finding 9?
9, yeah.
Okay, we're gonna go back to finding 9 since we lost audio for a second. And so finding 9 stated that the board exhibited disregard for the Brown Act as outlined in the California Government Code and NID policies regarding California's open meeting laws. We disagree with this finding. As we stated just a few minutes ago, you know, there are situations where we do provide reminders to the board regarding Brown Act requirements, caution board members where there may be pitfalls in some of the communications that we're having, and the board does take Brown Act training. Is it annual or biannual, Chris? Biannual training on the Brown Act. So we'll continue to keep a watchful eye on this. You know, I do appreciate, as I previously stated, that the board does tend to ask questions when they feel that they might be getting afoul of the Brown Act, and request legal advice from Dustin if it's a very contentious issue. So I think that we're doing pretty good. So we're gonna change this to the response to the board. The board has not exhibited a disregard for the Brown Act. Yeah.
You also said you were gonna get me a Brown Act badge.
Oh, yeah, and Dustin's gonna get a badge.
Thank you.
And maybe a jail cell.
I wanna make sure that's in there.
Yeah. There will be no snacks at any meetings following a admonishment. Now I got their attention. No more cookies.
No snacks. Heavy bat you're carrying there.
So, finding 10, NID has failed implementation of their board policy and has demonstrated organizational dysfunction in areas of trust and communication. We disagree with this finding. We think this is a broad generalization and pretty much an over-exaggeration. As with any agency, we do struggle with some of the policies. There has been many gray area policies, and there did seem to be some misunderstanding between some of the board responsibilities versus staff responsibilities. I think we have done a good job of clearing up with the revisions to policy 5040. And I also, you know, myself, as well as staff, as well as board members I've spoken to, we do not feel that there is widespread dysfunction between the board and staff. I think that we have a very solid relationship, and I hope to continue that.
Okay, so I have a comment about this. I would like to make, again, a stronger disagreement with the finding, because they're saying demonstrated organizational dysfunction. Yep. And that is, again, an allegation that is simply not true. Okay, it could be in the opinion of 1 or 2 people who went to the grand jury that there's something amiss or they're not happy, but that's really different than organizational dysfunction. And so then when you got your last sentence, dysfunction between board and staff is limited. Well, you know, I don't like how that says, because that's saying we have dysfunction, and we don't have dysfunction. There may be someone who disagrees with that, but we do not have dysfunction. We're a very functional board. As a board, we are very functional.
Yeah, I can agree.
So I would like.
Difference of opinion?
Well, yeah, but that's what boards are supposed to do. We're supposed to bring our differences of opinion, and we listen to each other, and sometimes we agree, sometimes we don't.
Take out dysfunction and put down difference of opinion between the board and staff is limited?
Well, you know, or whatever, but it's just, you know, there are disagreements between, you know, sometimes there are disagreements between board and staff. However, that's
normal.
That's normal, and it is our job to disagree and challenge each other to arrive at the best policy. So it does not mean there is dysfunction, and so I would really like to address that in a little bit stronger way.
Wouldn't dysfunction mean we can't move on, get on with the work?
Essentially.
It's a really loaded word. It means a lot, and so I would like to have that removed, because we are not dysfunctional, in my opinion, and you could poll everybody and see if they agree.
What if we modify the response to be more in the positive and say, as evident by the large amount of work that's been completed in the last year, the board and staff are functioning great?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we disagree, and we, whatever, that's great.
So, that's, I mean, I'm happy with step 10 then. I have one additional, that they should leave the troubled waters editorial
Yeah.
on the editorial page and doesn't, you know, that is, of anything, that be off more than anything else.
Right.
Yeah,
And
it,
that's the headline grabber.
it is.
It's a political headline grabber.
Somebody needs to be accountable with it. Why is it there? And we need to check some attitude at the door.
You're not gonna find the answers you seek through their process for us.
Oh, I understand.
Yeah.
Once again, we
That's
have,
kind of, if the grand jury wants to present themselves as being a professional, unbiased organization, then they have to get the facts right. And creating a header like that, troubled waters, is a dig that is below them. They don't need to do that. They need to put out the facts as they see them, and I agree with that. But they are in a position of power and influence, and they need to understand that it has a damaging effect.
Yeah.
Well, it's irresponsible,
Yeah.
frankly. It's irresponsible.
And
I was proposing a cover letter that goes along with this, because I fully agree with this part of the process, but it says all these things too.
I would recommend that we take a different tactic for the reasons I expressed earlier. In my experience, members of the grand jury serve on more than one grand jury, and I have seen agencies make the mistake of not rising above the fray and then getting essentially picked on again in a subsequent grand jury.
And I'm gonna take that, your words of caution there, but can you address it to the judge? Doesn't the judge have some discretion here?
No,
Our response is addressed to the judge,
Yeah.
but we're not gonna talk with them or.
no.
You can't send them
But
Advocate.
the judge can't say, hey, grand jury, you're drifting off into, editorial
Opinion, as
opinion.
opposed to facts.
Right.
Nope. I would recommend we take, like I said, the good things out of this, the things that make us think and try a little bit harder, and move on, because this will
Yeah.
pass very, very quickly.
Yeah. Having said that, I have not received one phone call,
Me neither.
Oh, I did.
but that's where you live.
Right. Well, that's a concept.
So, so in my experience also with grand juries, the people that don't like you, don't like the district in general, now, every agency has that group of people.
Sure.
They will use this against us in the future. Other than that, it's gonna just move on. We're gonna move on, and it's gonna be a thing of the
It showed
past.
up yesterday.
It did, it showed up in one of the swaps, but I wasn't entirely surprised,
But it didn't make,
but from the same type of group of people.
Yes, that's
but it didn't make top 5 or 10 strategic plans, did it?
From the public.
No, I think, you have to, not let the naysayers drag you down into, and we really gotta focus on moving forward.
I agree with you, Jennifer, but as a board member, I think it's important for us to make a statement as much to the public as to the NIV staff, that we are, because this is a reflection on not just the board, but the organization, and it's not positive. And I think you're right, we can always be better. But anyway, I have to say what I have to say, and I do agree, though, that generally speaking, we should take the high road. We don't need to get into some kind of a confrontation with the grand jury or anyone else.
One option could be is we keep our response high level and factual as it currently is, and if a board member so desires to write an editorial in the paper,
That was my question.
You can.
I'm doing this, okay, and I would state that I'm not speaking for the board, I'm speaking as a board member, right? Got in trouble with that before. Can't do that.
So, I agree with Karen. On our ranch, we have a road called the High Road. And every once in a while, I gotta remember to drive down that.
You don't drive down it daily?
not winning this argument. Also my experience, when you continue to battle these issues, you're actually just keeping it also on the radar of everybody. And we really just need to move on. We're doing great work. We have this great strategic planning. Yeah, we should focus on all the awesome things we're doing.
Yep.
We could take some big pictures of us all happy. Oh, doing Legos.
Yeah.
What a threshold moment.
Okay.
Right.
You missed out. Well, we can do it again for you.
Is that one of our goals?
Lego building championship.
Actually, it was,
Two, maybe
Yeah,
the
Chip.
two of us could do it together.
Yeah.
Justin, actually, I learned a lot from it, because I saw some people from the audience jump in and participate as team members,
Mhm.
and others not. And the ones that didn't, the ones who did, you know you can work with them.
Okay, let's go on to the recommendation. All right, recommendation 1.
That guy elected.
Conduct a comprehensive review and adopt a rate structure to align the cost of water provision to treated water and agricultural water. We accept the recommendation, so per Prop 218, we are required to set rates at an amount that is proportional to the cost to provide service to any specific customer base, and so we will do that when we go through the Prop 218 process in 2023.
Are we missing a word? Adopt recommendation and will be implemented,
Yes, sir.
or will implement?
There,
It's just a.
Future tense, will be.
I'll fix it. Okay. Recommendation 2, develop and adopt and implement a procedure to identify raw water users who do not produce agricultural products. We don't believe that that is necessary to be implemented. NID already requires customers to indicate what type of beneficial use they're going to be using our water for when they sign up for service, and that's how we develop the crop report. You know, we're going to continue to dial down on water use on a parcel-by-parcel basis, but I don't think that at this point it's appropriate to implement any type of procedure to, you know, classify raw water users.
And can we go right to the water code and say that our water is being used for public benefit, the beneficial uses? That's all, I mean, that's what we're required to, I think, to.
It is, that's all we are required
So
to do.
our water is being used for beneficial uses. We're not required under the water code to divide it up.
Yeah, so it says in-district customers have a right to water service from the district for reasonable and beneficial uses of water. Yeah,
Go there. Yeah, but put it in the response.
that was in the response.
What is?
Uh-huh.
Where, on the back, other side?
Page 21. Are you on R3?
Yeah, I was on two.
Oh, we're on R3.
Okay.
Oh, maybe I'm on R3. I'm answering R3 and R2 at the same time.
Yeah,
She was hoping to move it along.
It's the same answer.
Yeah, when I used to read my kids' books when they're really little, and I only read one page for a long time, they never caught on.
Is that what you're doing here?
No, I would never, ever do that. Okay, recommendation 3, develop and implement a policy to differentiate the water rates for non-agricultural and agricultural water customers. Recommendation will not be implemented. We have significant legal concerns for all the reasons we previously stated.
So we're not gonna even investigate different customer classes at all?
Well, we can visit it during the Prop 218 process, but we need to do a legal deep dive before I provide any recommendation that we should start delineating customer classes within the raw water customer base, because essentially there really isn't any actual difference between the cost to provide service to them. So it's hard to differentiate the customer class, which is one of the burdens of proof in the Prop 218 process. So.
And in talking to a lot of people who are non-agricultural that are producing a crop, all they have to do is sell $1,000 worth of product to get all USDA,
Right.
non-ag product producer, and they get the IRS deductions. And a lot of them are doing that already. They're just not using the IRS.
And a lot of people are growing
reporting
their
it.
own gardens and providing their own food, and so even though they're not commercially selling it, they are providing food and fiber to their community.
Right.
They
Exactly.
farm stands.
Correct. And if you have this conversation within the farming community, there is a variety of different opinions on what it means to be commercial versus non-commercial versus ag versus non-ag. So it's a sticky topic.
How many meetings did we go down that, try to we tried to do that, we couldn't come up with it.
So we'll continue to revisit this. Right now, we have to be a little bit careful with the customer class issues as it relates to Prop 218 and what the water code defines irrigation water as. So recommendation 4, develop and implement a plan and procedures for future reapportionment processes. We don't feel that this is a necessary recommendation. The process and procedures are included in the election code, and it is not a good idea to have different areas with conflicting policies and procedures, because then you run afoul of any laws. So we don't feel it's necessary. Same thing with recommendation 5, develop and implement policies and procedures for the review of district boundaries when NID annexes parcels into the district. So currently in the election code, there is a process by which cities and counties have to consider redistricting when they annex in a differentiation of population by 20% or more. It doesn't actually apply to special districts, but it is subject to the will of the board. So if there was large development in any specific area, the board at that time, they could make a determination that the districts are greatly unbalanced, and as such, we should go through redistricting early. So
That's the reason we decided, the board voted to have my area redistricted, is because you saw future population that there people might be coming?
no,
County, that was the,
no, it was based off of the actual population numbers, not any projection of future population. Okay, any more questions on recommendation 5? Okay. Recommendation 6, comply with California open meeting laws. We do that.
Okay,
No problem.
Wait,
Oh,
once again, I would like to say that
It implies.
it implies that we're not,
Yes.
and so I would like to see a positive statement that says, it's not that, oh, we're implementing their recommendation, it's that we do comply with this, with open meetings.
what if we just add a sentence that says, after recommendation already implemented, we do comply with law? 6.
Number 6.
We
do.
I don't know, but, you know,
We already do, thank you.
already do.
Continue to,
we continue
Continue.
Yeah.
to comply.
Okay. We can do that. Recommendation 7, develop and implement team building exercises to address the current dysfunction among district directors and between NID staff administration and the board. You know, we partially accept this recommendation primarily because I really like team building games. So we will continue to utilize this to substantiate more icebreakers.
We can't overrule that.
And you can't overrule the grand jury, so I think
We can overrule it.
you can overrule me, but I'm backed up. I am backed up by the grand jury.
why don't you just put down the Lego exercise?
We should do Legos every
That's
meeting.
the level they're down at.
Yeah. Yep.
So, team building exercise can be beneficial and be considered when appropriate, such exercise. I don't know, this is fine, I'm done. Frustrated.
You got 4 more years.
And that's it. So, is there any additional comments or questions? And then just as a matter of direction, do you desire to have this come back before the board? If you do, I recommend it be a consent, or would you like me to take your direction, modify the letter, and then have Mr. Beerwagen sign and submit per the directions? I would recommend we just move forward with it.
Yeah, I would think so
Okay.
too. I hate to take more
Let's get it
time.
off
It'll
the
just
plate.
be-
are we gonna get to see a final report? The final?
The final letter? Yeah, well, when it's all wrapped up, we'll shoot it out as an informational item.
We need a motion to say that out loud.
Yeah, so it is an actual agenda item, so you can somebody can make a motion.
I'll get a public comment first.
Okay.
Where'd it go?
I know, we lost her.
I lost my head.
There they are.
They're here.
The public like to comment on,
We actually have a John Q. public.
discussion about the Nevada County grand jury report for 2021. Start on your phone or come to the podium. All right.
Can we let the minutes show that there was no public comment about this?
Sure.
That would be great.
I think we should
Oh, we
show.
have a hand.
Oh, we do have a hand, okay. Well, let's find out.
Okay, Diane Dahl, go ahead.
Yes, hi. You guys can hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess as a public member, I wasn't here to comment on this, but I will. I think your behavior was shocking to me, actually. All I heard from you guys was what children would say if somebody criticized them. Like just defensive, defensive, defensive. It's not true, it's not true. Not one person asked, why would a grand jury say that about us? That's what I would have done.
Well, we don't know why they said it about it, but we don't have the ability to question them back. That's the problem. So it's a one-way communication. We don't have the ability to have two-way communication, which is why you sense the frustration, especially from me.
Well,
Not just you.
in my opinion, you in particular could have just said, wow, that's interesting. I don't think we're dysfunctional, but maybe we are. I mean, I didn't hear one person have any open mind toward all of that, and that was some pretty strong language. If a grand jury said that, wouldn't you be asking yourself, hey, is there some truth to this? Why are you guys just like putting up your defense and saying, no, not true, not true, not true? That was completely unproductive conversation, the whole thing.
Usually we don't dialogue with.
Yeah, so it's comment, right? It's public comment, not back and forth.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my comment. And Jennifer, even to your points, there were several times, Jennifer, when you tried to facilitate and say, well, guys, let's be open to this or that. I didn't hear anybody even say, yeah, maybe. And then ultimately they beat you down and you just said, you gave in and you said, okay, well, let's just do this. I mean, it's just really ridiculous, guys. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Diane. Thanks for your comment. Any further comments, star 9 your phone on grand jury report? Okay, now I will entertain a motion to.
So if you want to dispose of this today, it would be a motion to authorize President Beerwagen to sign with the amendments that were discussed.
Okay.
Make a motion to authorize the finalization of the response to the grand jury with the edits we discussed today and signed by President Beerwagen.
Second.
I'll second.
Any further discussion by the board? Comment?
I think the final letter should be as a consent item.
So we have a motion on the table.
We have a motion to move forward at this time.
And we had a first and a second.
So we have first, second, the parliamentary procedure would be to make a motion to amend the motion.
Well, I'd like to amend the motion to have it come back in the final form as a next consent agenda for next meeting.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
Second.
No, not to amend. No, I did not.
Okay, motion dies for lack of second. Madam Secretary, call the roll, please.
Division 4,
No.
Division 1,
Yes.
Division 5,
Yes.
Division 3,
Aye.
Division 2.
Aye. Thank you.
Will it be posted on our website or anywhere?
Yes, so once we are complete with the response, we'll send a final copy out to the board, as well as we'll submit it for the submittal instructions, and then it actually gets uploaded to the grand jury's website with everybody else's responses for that particular term, and we can also put it on our website.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, moving on to next item, item B, 5B, the new job description for the network analysis.
So I'll kick this off, and then we have John and Naomi here to help answer questions. So, come on up. So what is before the board is a new job description, which we are referring to as the network analyst. And this would be a new job description that would be housed in the IT division. And we're looking for input on the attached job description. So the background on why this job description is coming forth to the board at this point is simply because the board had added a position to the 2022 budget that we have not yet filled, because one of the first steps we needed to do was have this job description developed. So this job description was developed in conjunction with HR as well as John and his team. And they developed the job description based off of a review of like cities and agencies, similar jobs, as well as the salary scale. So we do have this before you for input. Based off the input, we'll make any required modifications and then we'll bring it back for formal approval. Anybody have any questions?
This will be difficult to fill.
Yeah.
I think it will, once we put it out there.
It will be difficult to fill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My question last night. There you go.
Yeah, one of our biggest challenges is our actual geographic location, and so our our labor talent pool is shrunken. So it is hard to get some of these more kind of niche positions filled.
Could this be a telecommute? Could someone from Bay Area apply for this and work for Bay Area and come up here once a month or once a?
Right now, we have a consulting service that does this off-site, and we struggle with some of the work that we need done. We need some boots on the ground to do some of this work.
So it will have to be one of the, I didn't notice that one of the requirements is timely attendance in the office.
Yeah, because of the remote sites that we have, yeah, we need somebody up there.
And there's a potential for a couple days a week at home, but
Yeah, there is.
Would this be a position you'd hire a recruiter for?
probably not off of the first round of recruitment, depending on what we get, possibly on the second recruitment if we have to go there.
I'd agree with that.
Are we asking them to do too much?
I don't think so. I just think it's a skill set that we need. We don't have it, and we need it. So this is a unique skill set that we need.
Be interested in hearing from our tech expert in the audience when Conduit approaches. It might be.
You know, in terms of recruitment, one of the things that I had thought about was there's the Nevada County Economic Resource Council, which actually
Right.
is focused heavily on
Tech.
turning this county and this particular section of Grass Valley, Nevada City, in more of a tech-forward way. So it would be interesting, once we get this together, to get it to them, to help with them. They can maybe help with our recruiting process. So
Good idea.
there's ways that we can go around just normal recruitment processes in the paper locally and get other organizations to help us.
It's a very well-developed position description, a lot of detail, a lot of, so that a person who might look at this job is gonna know what's entailed, and I really appreciated that aspect.
And are most of these positions, the network, I see on the comparison, there's an IT analyst, but then there's a supervisor, and there's a security manager, senior. Is this considered a senior supervisor type position?
The skill set that I'm looking for is a senior type role, someone that can oversee the network, take charge. Right.
Yeah. A tech leader, but not necessarily a people supervisor.
I think last night was pretty indicative of
Yes.
moving this particular position and John's team forward, in that we have historically been relatively underutilizing and underinvesting in our IT infrastructure. And so I think last night's final opportunities game shone a pretty heavy light on the fact that IT needs the support from the district and the board to move forward to make sure that the activities that we are doing are secure. This position would really help with that.
Any further feedback? All right, well, you will see this back for formal consideration. Go for it, yep.
What do we know? I have one quick one. How much will it cost?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in here, but
It's in the budget.
are we gonna get it at that price?
I plan to, yeah.
Yeah, we are not authorized to offer salaries that exceed the salary
Right.
adopted by the board.
And how much more OPEB is there attached to that salary, 124?
The OPEB obligation associated with a particular salary,
Is it equal to the salary?
no, are you talking about all benefits rolled in? OPEB is in reference to other post-employee benefits, which is retiree health care. Yeah, so add another 40% on,
40%?
yeah.
Go ahead.
All right, thank you. I'd be happy to help with the recruiting process, so, know a bunch of CCNAs that we could probably interview. The location is difficult, but I'll offer my time. And bring some candidates. So it's a pretty good, description here, so I might have a few questions of what you're looking for. Good.
Thank you. Good. Okay.
We had our public.
We just, I think,
Yeah.
offering input, right?
Yep.
Provide input, it says, okay. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Good job. Thank you. Item, 5C, workshop on private conduit accounts.
So I'm going to turn this over to Chip and Aurora, but I did just want to make one small comment. So I know that private conduit accounts are important from the perspectives that you do typically hear from your private constituents related to the topic, but this is one of those items that kind of got pushed onto our plate that is not necessarily aligned with some of the stuff we're doing. So these are some of the types of things I think will be helpful when we finish with strategic planning to help guide when is an appropriate time to bring these things forward. I just wanted to put that out there because I do think that this is probably a good example of where a good strategic plan comes into play.
Are you saying that this item came forward not because it was strategically important, but because someone pushed the item forward?
Yeah, so this was a request by the board based off of a complaint from a constituent.
Okay.
In my professional opinion, I don't know that I would have put this topic on the top of our long list of things initiatives we're working on right now. I think it's an important conversation to have. I would have prioritized it much lower.
Okay. So that's, I mean, you have to be able to tell us that
Right.
in real time so that we can consider that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize.
Yes, and that is definitely on me. Sometimes, I try not to be too controlling, and which is sometimes difficult. So sometimes I choose to be less controlling. Maybe I'm not the right issue. That was one of them. Guiding, not controlling. Okay.
Okay.
Certainly a problem in Division 5.
It is a problem everywhere.
It's a big problem in Division 4.
Okay, with that introduction. Good morning, y'all. I will not be assertive. I will just, no, seriously though, we are here really, I know it says open a workshop, but really we're here to review and discuss what a private conduit account is and kind of go over some of the challenges we're seeing with it. Really, it's more about educating everybody and letting you know how the process works and really what it is about. And so, having said that, we all are aware the district has over 500 miles of irrigation canals, and generally speaking, they traverse through private properties. And so if you're one of those landowners who has a canal running through your property, everything's peachy. You pay NID for a service outlet, a raw water box, you connect to it, you've got raw water, you're good. Unfortunately, of the district's 287,000 acres, a very small amount have a canal through them. So that leaves all those folks that want to connect to our raw water services to try to find a way to have access to our canals, and that's where this issue comes into play. The way I see it, there's roughly 3 different ways you can connect to an NID canal if you don't have it on your property. And the one that NID and our customer service team always recommends to anybody who calls the district is A, find easements to get to our canal, and B, pay for your own box so that you control your own destiny. Now that sounds great, but in reality it's very, very hard to do. So again, that's where we start. That's always what we tell our customers, our potential future customers, that's where we start. The second form that we have is mutual water companies. When we have entire blocks or neighborhoods that want to connect to NID, one of the avenues we experienced in the past is the formation of a mutual water company. Those can get very challenging. They are a legal entity within themselves, have to go through the LAFCO process. There's just a lot of paperwork established with it. So not many people follow that path, especially when it's just, 2 or 3 customers that want to connect in, really doesn't support forming a mutual. So a lot of folks don't go down that path. So the last one is the private conduit account. So the way these work is that generally speaking, we have a primary account holder. A primary account holder is somebody who paid for the installation of the raw water box, the service outlet.
It's theirs, they paid for it, they're ready to roll, they have their own water line that goes to their property. Somebody else comes along that's in between that service box and where it's delivering to, says, hey, I'd love to get NID water, can I share into that line that you have developed? And as long as that primary account holder is ready and willing to share in that box, we allow that to occur through this private conduit account. Essentially what it says is that this person can share that box, however, they don't have control of the box. So they're always at the whim of the primary account holder, which is where this really becomes challenging. In addition, the other challenge that we run into is that our responsibility as the district stops really at the discharge point of the box. Everything beyond that point is private. And what we run into is that many folks try to share a small amount of water on a large pipeline, and they don't always coordinate usage on the private side. And so we may have a box that has a purchase allotment of 2 minors inches, but of the two customers, one's using all 2 minors inches and the other customer's getting 0. And then there becomes a dispute. And the dispute generally tries to pull the district in to solve it. But unfortunately, it's all occurring on the private side, and we try to stay out of that. You'll see in the staff report, I provided a bunch of the rules and regulations that show and describe where the rules of responsibility lie in these particular accounts. The district has been, how do I say this? The district, in many cases, has been pulled into these lawsuits, and we've learned from those, and that's how we've developed these rules and regulations. And I think it's very clear, not only in the rules and regs, but really essentially on the private conduit form 5G, where we very clearly spell out, if you sign on to this type of account, you must hold NID harmless. In fact, it says, the undersigned do hereby agree to hold Nevada Irrigation District, its agents, servants, and employees free and harmless from any damages, liability resulting therefrom or in connection with said private conduit. It also says on bullet number 2 on Form 5G, it is further understood and agreed that the district does not guarantee continuous or adequate service, that its obligation to deliver water ceases at the conversion from the Nevada Irrigation District conduit, and the service is subject to the conditions and limitations of the private conduit through which the service is being made. So again, everyone who has a private conduit account has signed on to this form, and we attempt to make it as clear as we can that our responsibility stops at the box. Your private services on the other side are your own private issue. We do make some recommendations to help when we can. So for instance, if you have a raw water box with 5 minors inches and it's going to 5 different parcels, how do you ensure that each customer is only using their 1 minors inch allotment? What we recommend the private people do is buy a dole flow, which is basically an orifice, and install it to each parcel so that everybody's guaranteed 1 inch. We'll make recommendations like that, but that's as far as we go. We don't get into the arguments amongst private landowners. And then the last thing I will state is that many times when you have a private conduit such as this, the private conduit itself is traversing many, many properties. I provided an example, actually 2 examples in the staff report, and we'll just start on the first one, that map I provided, 1434. What you'll see is about midway down on the page, you can actually see the blue line in the box. So that's where NID makes its delivery. From there, it's in a private pipeline that goes to all of these green parcels. So you can see it is a very, very large system. We really, here at NID, have no idea where the pipe goes, what it's made out of, or its size. And that's why we really can't take any responsibility for what's happening over there. It's not our facility.
Out of curiosity, in this particular box, how many minors inches do they pay for?
Oh, off the top of my head, I don't know. But what I can tell you is that we do know that this particular box is at capacity. So we will no longer sell any more water through this box until either their facility is upgraded or something else occurs, maybe another box is installed. We know that because the amount of complaints we have received back from all of these customers is expanding, and so we're done.
And then one other question, so how do we, NID, handle the billing? So there's one bill for one box and,
Great question.
yeah.
So the difference is, so in a private conduit account, you pay for your account just like everybody else does. You pay the base rate and your water allotment fee.
Oh.
So we treat each individual account as their own, as a standalone.
Yeah.
That's the difference between a private conduit account and a mutual. A mutual pays for one base rate and then they distribute the water to everybody else. That's the big difference.
This particular example, they're paying for around 28 miners inches, but are only using 22 3/4 or something like that. Because of seepage and evaporation loss. Having said that, one line, I can't remember which line it is, more people on there than paying.
Yeah. So again, private issues, and this is one of the, I've included this as an example because it's one we hear from all the time. And we have to continue to say, look, we're sorry, this is your own private water distribution system. We're doing the best we can. We're getting water to your box. We're giving you what you purchased. Anything beyond that, y'all need to figure out.
And they're doing a lot of things right. They have daily maintenance where they clean out things, but they do have a problem with their pipe end of it. It doesn't take the full capacity. They put the valves on, the floats, but they get taken off by somebody. They're just not working together. And so the recommendation is find out who has the primary, see if they can get control of it, and then they can tell everybody down the road, down the line, to do what they have to do.
They mentioned that they have some kind of like, on a model kind of situation, they have a actual method of metering out the water that they purchased, but they don't actually get a box, right?
They don't get a box. And in that example I provided, that would be an orifice plate, a dole flow, that would go, dole flow.
Dole flow.
D-O-L-E.
Explain how that works.
Yeah, so it's basically, keep in mind, the way to envision it is, let's say you have a 1-inch PVC pipeline going to your property, that's where you get your water from. A dole flow is just a small, looks like a coupling that goes in the pipe that restricts the amount of water you can get to your parcel.
Oh, I got it.
Similar to the orifices we have.
It's similar to the orifice plate we are going to use, right? And it allows those private customers to then share equally based on the purchase amount.
Costs $300. They're super expensive right now.
Are they really? I haven't priced them out lately, but.
Dole flow, once they put the 4-inch on this one line, everybody else gets the appropriate amount of water, except that gets taken off occasionally,
You said it's.
and that one line is taking more water than they signed up for.
Are people going out and
We
digging
have-
up these inline couplings? So people are going out and digging up these inline couplings?
Not all pipes are below ground,
Right.
especially on irrigation.
Yeah, and so somebody is gaming that system, and the rest of the people who are doing it responsibly are not getting their fair share of the water, and we have no recourse.
And they call it ID because it's water.
In an ideal world, because of the challenges this poses for staff and getting in the middle of all these private property issues, we wouldn't have a program like this. In reality, it's gonna be very difficult to get rid of it.
Right.
Yeah, because you know how historic it is.
It is,
Well,
it's
you've got so
just,
many
it's not,
people depending on it.
yep, I agree.
I think that any elimination of this type of offering would basically put a halt to all
It would.
raw water sales. Because most of the people who have the canal in their property or have direct access to it have already hooked up. The ones that are filtering in now are trying to find ways to get to us.
I have a couple ideas. I do think we can help folks, we're the experts in the water arena. I think we could have a template agreement, it's not mandatory per se, but if you folks as neighbors want to come together and develop a water source for your properties, here's a template agreement that we think covers the issues you fill in the blanks, you negotiate amongst yourselves, and then you record it. And then inside that agreement, you can have a dispute resolution clause, because that's really the heart of the issue.
Yeah.
Is
Right.
a lot of these people don't have formal arrangements, so they're, trying to resolve issues with their neighbors, and their resort is to go to Superior Court, which is incredibly expensive, incredibly disruptive to the neighborhood. So if you can have an alternative dispute resolution process, and I don't know what that is, but it could be cheaper, less disruptive to their need for water, and, hopefully quicker to some kind of resolution. I think that could be very helpful. So, that's something we could potentially assist, but, keep in mind, I agree wholeheartedly, our obligation ultimately always has to end when our line ends, at the measurement point. But if we can help them kind of resolve their disputes in a more expeditious way, that could be.
At least offer them the format or a template of how to establish an agreement. Now, the one thing I didn't bring up in all of this is that if you're a primary account holder, primary box holder, and everybody's on your box, and you're fed up with them taking more than they should, you have every right per our agreement to kick everybody off.
They enforce that.
So because our documentation has who is the primary, or generally has that, they provide 30 days written notice, and I think it has to be notarized, and also cannot be done in the middle of irrigation season, because we had some concerns that you don't want to just cut somebody off in the middle of prime time for water, so.
So in a couple of cases, the primary sold off lands.
Yes.
And they may not even be a customer. They may have an inactive status, or that person may have left.
Yeah.
And they no longer buy water from us. They have no skin in the game. They really don't care what's going on. In one case, one person at the end of the road hasn't seen water in 2 years, and everybody up front takes it. Or in another case, somebody dug a pond inside the ditch to divert the water.
Yeah.
So it's a huge problem.
What a mess.
And we can't take that template out retroactively.
They have to agree to it.
Essentially,
Voluntary.
it would be their own agreement, right?
Yeah.
Rich, it would be something they would have to, as a group, agree to and sign on to.
And in one case, they didn't even know who the primary was.
Yeah, so we have some of those challenges, but basically, that's why we have all the filing system downstairs, all those banker's boxes. Microfiche. Aurora's gonna throw something at me, because she does not like going to the microfiche, but, because it's a real challenge. But some of these date way back when. Years and years and years, generations and generations. And so we have to dig through the file and find out who initially put in the box. That's not always super clear. Generally, we know. But you also have the ability, if you are the primary, you can give up that status and sign it over to somebody else. So we track all that, or we do the best we can.
Was my recommendation to one group, actually two of them, find out who the primary is. Go get your name on it if you want to have everybody treated equitably. Start signing agreements.
Rich, so what happens on a sale or transfer of the property for the primary?
So our accounts and the primary stay with the parcel.
They stay with the parcel.
Yeah.
So the new owner then would be automatically the primary box holder?
Essentially.
Yeah.
I wonder if
Did they learn that
that's
in
in real estate disclosure
Yeah,
101.
The big problem is that these
I bet
aren't
not.
in real estate disclosures. That's
I
one
know.
of the biggest problems we face, is that when
Yeah.
a landlocked parcel for the city, it doesn't allow for easement, and there's no coordination when there's a sale of property.
Right, that's a real estate
It's a
problem.
real estate problem.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also, if we're providing,
I'm working on
if
it.
they're paying $570 a season for fixed fees and getting zero service for it,
Yeah.
because they're not getting the box clean, they're not getting any report. And yet, people that have multiple boxes only pay one fixed fee and only pay $180 for every. And
Wait,
so,
is that true?
and
That's not true.
Wait, yes,
I would like
per
to,
box.
they pay one fixed fee,
You're talking about the boxes that
they
move.
pay $180 for every extra box.
That's when the service moves.
And then for $400 a season, they get, NID does irrigation for them and opens and closes boxes for them. And so they're getting much more service, but these poor people are paying full rate and not getting any service. The least it seems like we could do is offer a remediation, a dispute resolution program, or offer to go out and make sure that when they're putting in the pipes and that they're putting in these flows, I mean, for $300, that's not even one fixed fee for 1 year.
So we can offer the template agreement, but we are unable to go out and inspect any installation of a private facility.
It's like we own it, it's like the
Yeah.
minute you see it, it's.
Well, then we should
right?
make it like equal to multiple boxes that people have.
So the multiple box thing, I think I want to make sure is clarified, and Chip is much more well-versed than I am. It's my understanding that the boxes that move, it's just a geographical location of the same water service, relocation. So, you know, they have a big ranch, I want 4 miners inches, and I'm going to use it here part of the year, move it. This is not the same thing. This is an individual, I'm primary condo owner, we are collectively using 20 minor inches. Dustin, my neighbor, has 10. So he's paying his fees and rate on his 10 miners inches. I pay the remainder. So it's not the same thing as moving of the box for moving actual location of delivery.
So what's the fixed fee comprised of? What does the fixed fee pay for?
The fixed fee, so it's just a distribution of all of the costs to provide the service between the volumetric portion and, in this case, the fixed fee. It's all fixed because it's all one volumetric rate.
What?
In rate design, because they are it's essentially all fixed because it's not measured.
That's interesting.
That's how most raw water accounts are.
This moving of the box
Yeah,
on
is
the
that-
big
is that-
ranch,
is that-
is that?
I would have to ask Chip to speak to it.
So and Jennifer nailed it. It's basically, I think what Director Peters is referring to is there are some customers who have multiple boxes. And sometimes they want half their water in this box, half their water in that box, half their water in that box. And we do that. And there is a fee for that, but it's, I think, $180 for extra box.
So you're not physically moving the box, you're moving the water.
They're opening
Correct.
and closing the door.
Oh,
Correct.
closing the box. Oh,
Correct.
that's right.
Correct.
Oh, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was thinking moving.
But it's
the box.
staff time, it's labor for NID staff to go out to all of these
Sure.
boxes and say, okay, it's Tuesday, I gotta pull this box, I gotta put that box.
Yeah, and we charge for those. So, for instance, a rotation is kind of the same thing, where they maximize their water for 5 days, and then we rotate to another customer. We charge for those services.
$400.
Except on target days where they do their own.
But it just doesn't seem fair to these people, because this is the biggest,
I don't
customer complaint.
I don't
we get.
disagree with you that it doesn't seem fair. Unfortunately, we can't control what's going on the private side. So when they call, we recommend to them, we feel your plight, here's your primary, have a discussion with them, see if you can work it out. If you can't, you can always cancel your service. We would recommend you find a different way to our facilities. We would be glad to help you get a box put in, find the easements, or we can't help with the easements, but, you know, we would be here to assist to get your own account, which is what we always recommend.
I'm starting to agree with Ricky on, this is a real estate disclosure problem.
Oh, it's huge. Huge. It is huge. And actually, I'm working on it with the Nevada County Association of Realtors, and I made another connection, actually last night, with Michael Straight, and who offered to facilitate it, because it is a huge problem. And we're getting a large influx, this is a little off, but we're getting a big influx in the last, probably 5 years since the market has shot up, in newer agents who have no idea about, and it's not their fault, they just haven't been educated, and there's not been a process for educating them. So what I offer to do is work with the education committee of the real estate, of the Board of Realtors, and I figured, you could come, or I'll put something together, or you can, or whatever, but to help, to Chip, to really help beef up the education part of the agents.
And disclosure.
Well, there is this, we won't go into that, but I could talk to you offline about it, but to beef all of that up and provide better disclosure, better information to the buyers and sellers.
Yeah, so, the last thing I'll say is that when we do get a new customer who is taking over a parcel that somebody else had a private conduit account, we do attempt to reach out to them and provide them the information about these accounts so that they're up to speed. But, the easements where the pipelines are, all of that is not an NID thing.
Right.
So it
And
becomes
see,
a private.
So when a property changes hands, like if you're one of these people, you know, down here in the green, and the real estate people say, oh, you got NID
Yeah.
on your property. And they don't know any more than that, right? And it's a tenuous relationship that they would have with the box holder.
Yeah.
So that's a big deal.
I have a question, I'm not sure we want to, this is for Dustin primarily. Last year, we had a primary who was not buying water, but taking the water that was designated for the people beyond him, part of the,
Well,
you
then
know, the
there's
group.
that. Then there's.
All right, and that, I think, ended up in court. In this,
Imagine.
one of these examples here, we have almost like 27 different customers. Don't they have some legal, can't they, I mean, Superior Court, is that the only place they can go?
No, I mean, that's back to my earlier comment. We could create, like a dispute, a sample dispute resolution, agreement that, okay, we as a neighborhood group here, we are in dispute, but we can't resolve it, you know, amongst ourselves, rather than go to Superior Court where you have 27 different people hiring 27 different attorneys, and I mean, it's just incredible cost. We agreed to this dispute resolution process, and that could be binding arbitration, it could be mediation, it could be, you know, there's some really good water experts that are engineers that, you know, they could dig into these issues and then provide recommendations, and that could be binding or non-binding.
Well,
You know,
they know the problem, and they know if they put a go float on them at 4 inches, everybody gets water. Except now you have people who are getting water that are not signed up with us. Don't we have recourse there? They're taking water.
So that's theft of a private commodity. So once the water has passed our delivery point, any theft that occurs downstream of that is stealing of those people's water. It's not an NID issue.
But they're not paying us operations and maintenance.
They're not. They paid for the water to the orifice plate, so they paid for their purchase allotment. Where it goes and how it's divvied up beyond that point, we really don't have much say.
private.
So I just would like to support Dustin's idea specifically. That's a good idea. The other thing that comes to mind is if we could have like if you're considering, you know, starting one of these, have a cheat sheet or something that
FAQ
says,
or something?
yeah, and here are some issues you should consider. Here's some best practice designs, or it's signing the agreement, and it's, you know, it's having the floats and, so, anyway, I do think if we could help them a little bit more, that would be a good thing. That avoids our staff having to get kind of in the middle.
In the middle,
of these
yeah.
conflicts.
Yeah.
For new accounts, you could go so far as to require an agreement and all of these things.
Yeah.
A new,
I hereby recognize blah, 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 blah. Yeah,
And-
I think that's a good idea. I think we should work on something
And
like
could
that.
the primary, well, could the primary be an LLC or of all those people belonging to that?
Well, it'd be better if they're all mutual water companies.
Mhm.
Then we're dealing with one actual organization.
right.
I mean, give the power to a primary box holder, single person.
We have no,
They already hold
Yeah.
power because they own
Get rid
the
of
box.
I understand.
And they can at any time elect to,
That one person could devalue the property value of all those people
yes,
in
Yeah.
just one fell swoop.
yes, correct.
yeah. That's why it really would be best, if especially these large ones, form a mutual water company. But I doubt they're gonna wanna do that.
Could we have, like, if you have a group over X size, that they have.
Require that they do a mutual?
We could say all new private conduit boxes over whatever 4 parcels is required to form a mutual
Well,
water company.
they seem to come in nickel and dime, right?
Yeah.
They'll get an initial account in a primary, and then one neighbor hooks up, and then later one neighbor hooks up. It just kind of trickles in, it doesn't all come at once. If it does come at once, and this is getting more and more rare, mutual is the discussion that comes about.
Yeah, because during drought, we have a box, and we had new neighbors, and they were pumping the bejeepers out of our groundwater, and our well was drying. So we had them come as a second owners until they lifted the restrictions and they could get their own. And there are circumstances where you need that.
Yeah.
but to be an ongoing, 27 parcels, it's just out of control.
Yeah, so what exists today is, it exists for a reason, and it's bumpy and a challenge, but I think a lot of people benefit from it. I do think the change in people moving in, moving out has really heightened the challenges with this particular process, but I do think a lot of people enjoy it and benefit from it, especially because they all get along. That's when the challenges come in. Somebody moves out, somebody moves in, they don't see it the same way, and then this all goes sideways. So again, when anybody calls in and is exploring a new raw water account, we always guide them down, get your own box, get an easement. That's the way to do it. If you can't at all find a way to do that, there are other options, but we don't recommend them.
And we need to really provide support for people that, and outreach, maybe to the realtors, that people need easements for their water lines. So many people that are new to the country, they come and say, oh, no, you're not gonna put anything on my property.
Right.
And it's crazy, because it devalues their property if the neighbors can't get water.
Or they assume they have an easement.
Right.
President Beerwagen, Ms. Dole has been waiting.
Diane Dole, you have a comment? Go ahead.
Yes, I do. So I have some questions mostly, because as you may or may not know, I have a situation where we are getting water one day and not the next, and then we're getting water partially, and then not for a week, and then we're getting water again. And obviously we go out and look at the valves off of, we're on box 3187. And neighbors are closing the valves, right? We have, the box owner actually is not where the box is. He's on a completely separate property. So people are opening and closing the water, and we go open it, and then the next day somebody goes and closes it. It's pretty ridiculous. We also have a situation where it appears that somebody actually dug up a place where we had put a valve and removed it and closed our pipe back up and left our valve on the side of the road. Still don't know what happened there. But first of all, my questions. What is the definition of a service outlet? In 5.04.01 in the attachment.
Yeah, I apologize. I don't have the exact definition in front of me, but essentially a service outlet on the raw water side is the raw water box. It's the box that's on the side of the canal. Or if you're in a pipe section, it's the manifold.
Okay, got it. And it states there that NID measures how much water is moving through that service outlet. How is that done?
So we take all of the purchases on any given service outlet, add them together, and then provide an orifice plate in that service outlet for that allotment of water.
And how often is that?
So in other words, if you have 5 separate customers sharing that box, they're all buying 1 miner's inch, we'll put a 5 miner's inch orifice plate in that box, and that's how we do the delivery.
Oh, okay. Okay, got it. With regard to the maps, maybe just out of convenience, but on the map after the one we were speaking about, on page 163 is box 3187. That's the Wiswell Gladding Canal box, which is where we're off of. How are we reconciling a parcel with a service address?
So our accounts are based on the parcel number, the
APN.
APN, thank you. Yeah, they're tied to an APN and not a parcel address.
Okay, yet the accounts are by service address.
No, they are still using an APN. You can have a different service address, and we can mail your billings to whatever address you'd like, but essentially the water service is tied to the APN.
Okay, all right. And then my next question, when I compare, and the NID was kind enough to send me a list of customers. It says Wiswell Gladding Canal, and then it's got a list of 17 customers off of that. I guess that canal. I don't know if they're off of the box, but on the map, it states that the green parcels are the parcels served from box 3187. Yet I would say there are far more addresses served off of this canal that are on the address list. So I see 7 parcels that are green, but according to the NID records, there are 17 customers. Many of them are not even close to being green off of Valley View Circle, Serene Estates, and so forth. Why is that?
Yeah. So the map only indicates customers who are currently purchasing water. There are many that may be inactive that are listed under that same box.
Well, I'm talking about people who has signed up for 2022 summer water.
Hold on.
For example, I mean, the most noteworthy example is the people who own the property on the box that the box is on. They signed up for 20 miners inches. They have a huge ranch. It's the entire parcel, but it's not green. Why is that?
I think that some of the confusion, and I'm sorry, this is Aurora Tipton, Customer Service Administrator, is I believe that the list you're looking at is for the entire Wiswell Gladding Canal, whereas the map that you're looking at with the highlighted parcels is specific to one box was on that canal.
This map was created as an example for us to look at, not as an overview of the whole canal.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, so you're saying we are the 7 served by box 3187. There must be other boxes upstream that are serving the other parcels.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Well, I'll be happy to make contact with you offline regarding your box specific issues. If you want to go ahead and email me, or do you have her contact information, Aurora?
I do.
Okay, we'll make contact with you, make sure we get the rest of your questions answered.
Are you telling me to stop asking questions?
No, it's not pertinent to our conversation here. That's the problem. Our conversation is about how we respond to requests.
Okay. Okay, then I would put in my final comment, which is I totally would agree with and support an agreement between neighbors. I will leave you with one comment. The gentleman who is moving the valves on and off mostly passed away. His property changed hands. The only time we had water every day was when his property was vacant because they were changing hands.
Okay, thank you for your comment. That is not our problem.
Well,
I hate to say it that way.
No, well, it's not our problem. The truth is, it's not our problem. Now, if we choose to be proactive and we want to make a community contribution, like we do with other stuff, we can do that. But to spend our time,
Well, as it sits right now, I'd be reluctant to approve another one unless we make major changes.
Why don't staff, we'll go back, we'll talk about some of the items we've discussed related to potential new services, such as requiring a mutual water company to be formed. Let us flesh it out a little bit.
Yeah.
I think just helping people to understand this is right for conflict.
Right.
So a mutual water company is a way to avoid that. Yes, it requires more upfront work, but you avoid the downstream conflict that is probably inevitable with these kinds of structures.
so I can appreciate that, but I will say that mutuals come with their own set of challenges. The only difference is they're governed by a board such as this, and the entire community has to get together and agree and have bylaws and do all of that. So it really doesn't make a lot of sense unless it's quite a few parcels.
When did that change where we're not writing all the paperwork for the
2017. So in the past, the district used to recognize mutuals just on our own. we would have to police them and do the bylaws and make sure they were up to snuff.
Yeah.
Didn't involve LAFCO, which raised a bunch of red flags. So in 2017, we changed our rules and regulations that say, if you want to be a mutual water company, go to the state, get recognized, follow the procedures, and then you're good to go.
But it is complicated and it's long.
It is, yes.
And it's repercussions.
So, okay, staff will, again, we will continue to encourage anybody who is inquiring, do it the right way. The right way is get your own box, find easements to the canal. Again, I can't tell you how much we emphasize that, and we will continue to go down that road while we discuss.
I have one question just to Aurora. How easy would it be to get the primary box holder on this one?
I believe you said there were what? Well, short answer, many, many hours, because I have to look at every single account generally and trace it back year by year.
Yeah, and I understand you're not even buying water.
The primary account holder?
Yeah.
I don't know on that specific box, but I do several of these requests every year, and it takes me many hours.
It's challenging.
I'd like to talk with you more about it offline.
Is there a way we can abandon that, and form a better organization?
Yeah, do we have a right of abandonment? Like when the tenant leaves all their stuff in here?
Let us go back and talk, and then we'll come back with an item. How sensitive of a priority is this for you?
Well, we're getting phone calls a lot, and.
I got the deal with mine
but-
yesterday, my own one.
Oh, you
But
have
it's
one
not-
of these?
Yeah.
But it's not
Are you the primary?
compared to other things. But out there, people are causing them a big problem.
So let's, we'll make a judgment on when to try to slip this back in, fitting with our schedule, and we'll, reach out to Ms. Dole to help her out with her specific issues.
Great.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else like to comment on, that haven't started on your phone?
I have a quick comment.
Step to the podium.
So I actually just went through this. So I have a private conduit that goes across 3 ranches, and not allowing two reasonable people to get into a contract and share a pipe is very detrimental. I understand like 27 people, that's a nightmare. So I would suggest at least for someone mentioned like 4 or more, whatever the number is, the people that share good fences, I think that we want to encourage that. One thing I would say is I got my template from Jane Miller, a realtor, and I have got us some temporary dates for PCAR for us to go talk to them. So we'll go to Placer County and try to educate those guys as well. She's already doing it in Nevada County. But if you just reach out to maybe one of those 2 organizations as a starting place for a template. But it is really hard to figure out what to do to get that recorded.
Yeah.
What are the steps? So it'd be great to have that FAQ or something.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you, Trevor. Okay. With that, thank you, Chip, thank you, Aurora.
Thank you.
Policy, report policy, capitalization. I think that's Jennifer.
It is. So this is a proposed draft policy, we are presenting to the board for input. Based off of the input, we'll make revisions and then bring back at a later date for requesting formal approval. This is a capital asset policy, so this essentially governs how our capital assets are handled from an accounting perspective. So this is not related to the purchase of capital assets or the disposal of capital assets. Those are covered in a procurement policy. It is related to how we handle actually capitalizing the asset once the asset is acquired and or constructed, and then the asset, how it gets depreciated over time. So one thing that's really important to remember is the construction of new assets that add value to the system. They actually add value to your overall fund balance as the asset depreciates over its life cycle. Then the depreciation is a non-cash item that reduces your overall fund balance. Without a capital asset policy, NID, in my opinion, as well as Ms. Bouchane's opinion, and Debbie as well, we have overly complicated our capital asset processes, and there is no policy. And so we are spending more time capitalizing nominal items that are not a material component of any particular fund's fund balance, down to something that costs less than $1,000. So you have to be really careful about your capitalization because it does impact your fund balance. One of the things that's different between a private company versus a public agency is that it's very important for a private company to depreciate assets because it actually is a tax write-off, right? Because it is a loss on your books. For a public agency, the requirement to depreciate assets is a fairly new requirement. I think it's maybe 15 years old. And we don't benefit from any tax write-offs, right, because we don't pay taxes. So what sometimes depreciation is used for, it's used for two things. It's one, to help understand the health of your overall fund balance and the health of your overall assets, because it will give you an idea if your total asset value is, start closing the gap on your depreciation. It means you're not investing enough in your assets to renew and replace them. And then secondly, some people actually use depreciation for capital planning, and that is different based off of each agency. We look at as more pay-go and actual projects projected over a planning time period as opposed to utilizing depreciation. So we've developed this capital asset policy that will be utilized for all construction projects, equipment acquisition, and also repairs or replacements. But with repair or replacement, it actually has to be a repair or replacement that adds value to the original asset. So if my chair is at the end of its life cycle anyways, and I am just painting the arms so that I can get by for another 2 years, it's not really adding any value to the asset because its actual life cycle is still essentially the same, right? Repainting the arms isn't going to help. Well, if I replace the wheels and add a rocket booster on the back, my chair is super awesome. There's greater asset value, so then that repair and replacement would be capitalized. So we have tried to break down the different categories and definitions in the policy. So you'll note we identify and define what capital assets are, what capital outlay or capital expenditures are, and then capital projects. So one of the changes, and we'll talk more about this in the budget, what you'll see is some capital projects have asset value, and some projects that we consider special projects in the capital program are maintenance projects that don't necessarily add life to the assets or value to the assets, but we feel that they're important enough to track separately, but they will not be capitalized on our books. So for a good example for that is like painting water tanks. You paint water tanks so they live for 60 years. You don't paint a water tank and then it can live till 75 years. Right. So construction and progress, this is an accounting term. So when we are under construction with any specific project, the asset isn't capitalized till the construction is complete. So we hold all of the expenditures related to the value of the asset into construction and progress. And then once that construction and progress is complete, then we move it over to the actual fund, parent fund. Yes, Director Peters.
Are all those properties we purchased for the Centennial project, are they still under construction and progress?
No, I have moved all of those items. So they are actually, because from an accounting perspective, you can't hold open construction or project for years and years and years. And so it does become an asset of the actual fund itself. So we have moved to be in compliance with generally acceptable accounting practices. We have moved the properties as an asset value over to the water fund. So from an accounting perspective, we are no longer accounting for Centennial as a construction in progress. And that is consistent with the information we have provided to the state hearing officer related to the state filed water right application and the status of the project, which is dependent upon the outputs of the plan for water process. Okay, so improvements, we define improvements, infrastructure assets, and tangible assets. An intangible asset that is something that would inherently have value if you were to sell it. So like a FERC license could be an intangible asset that has value to it. Certain software would have an intangible value to it, so that could also be considered an asset. We covered repair and maintenance. The capitalization policy, we set the threshold limits. So when we look at the threshold limits, we look at it from a couple of different perspectives. One perspective is, what does the board and public care about? Boards and publics always care about purchase of equipment and vehicles. So you oftentimes see equipment and vehicle assets are, set at a reasonable threshold, and also through the procurement policy. So those do come before the board. It is not a good look to the public or to the board if you have just carte blanche authority to go buy a bunch of vehicles because they're under the limit, right? Intangible assets, we talked about 35,000. Land, there is no minimum. So land value does not depreciate down to zero over time, and so we do set the value of land purchases at zero for requiring capitalization. Buildings and structures, 35,000. And then infrastructure assets is more of a consideration, and I highlighted it, of the total fund balance, whether it materially impacts the fund balance, because we have a lot of asset value in pipes and dams, and so when you start booking assets at the infrastructure level, you raise that limit up because it doesn't have a material impact on the actual fund balance itself, and that's the purpose of capitalizing your asset and then devaluing it through depreciation. And so about $150,000, or greater than 10% of the total value.
So what happens when our assets, land, increase in value?
So you typically don't go back and revalue them. You could, but you don't want to go back and make prior period adjustments. It's just not even.
Well, because the land can also decrease in value.
Yeah,
So,
you'd be chasing it. And also, you got to remember, these are non-cash items. There's no real benefit to going and revaluing them.
Unless you're going to,
If you're going to
the acquisition.
yes, if we were going to disperse of assets, then we might go through a new valuation process to know what their market value is.
So I have a question. What happens to equipment or tools or any of these things that fall under the threshold as, for accounting purposes, they're not capitalized?
No, they're purchased as materials and supplies in the operation budget.
Okay, so they're like the things in private we would write off as a business expense.
Right. They're smaller items.
On this capitalization threshold, so if it's under 30, so if vehicles are under 35,000, we don't capitalize.
Yeah, so all that's meaning is we're not adding the value of the capital asset to the fund balance. So the fund balance is not increasing because we bought I don't even know what's under 35,000.
Snowmobile.
A quad runner.
yeah, quad.
Snowmobile.
And so the capitalization threshold for vehicles is 35,000, and then on the top of page 4, it says, and I don't understand, approval of the board of directors is required for the disposal of capital assets with a value of 100,000 or more, excluding vehicles.
So that is currently included in the procurement policy, and essentially what that means, and most agencies have this, and the draft procurement policy, I've lowered the disposal of any assets under the general manager's authority to $10,000 or $35,000. And the purpose of that is so, as we go through and purchase new inventory, vehicles, whatever it is, you also need to be purging your inventory, right? There's a lot of reasons, insurance reasons, having too many vehicles, the new CARB rules, whatever it is. And there is a process by which in the procurement policy that you dispose of assets depending on their cost. And so some of them require auction or selling to the highest bidder. Some are not worth the money to go through that trouble to do that. So they're more, a lot of agencies sell on Craigslist, those types of places.
If a vehicle is $99,000, we can dispose of it however we want.
No, it would still follow the procedures of having to go to bid, basically, auction.
And then one final question, it says the district, on the footnote of the capitalization threshold table, the district will consider federal capitalization thresholds for capital assets funded
By federal award. Some grants, depending on the grant, depending on the agency, depending on the bill to authorize the expenditure, have a variety of different rules related to how you contract for the item that you receive the grant for even as far as how you capitalize the asset. So I always like to tell the story about this bus barn that in Lincoln we built with federal transit funds. And they had a very high they really thought a lot of their bus barn. So it had to be capitalized. It would not be something that would normally be capitalized because it's not material significant to the overall finances of a city or the fund under which it was purchased. And then they require you to monitor it. So we just always put those kind of placeholders in there in case the federal requirements are more strict than what our own are. We then defer to the more stricter requirements.
And what about the state? Is the state?
I've never seen it in a state grant, but we can add that in. We can just add it in as placeholder.
Yeah.
In case the state gets fancy too.
I have a question on, and it says under capital assets, with the expected useful life of at least 2 years. And then in the chart, the useful years are a minimum of 5 years of useful life. So I just didn't know, what you had in mind in speaking to as,
It's inconsistent. I would go with 5, but let me think on this a little bit and get that clarification when we come back.
I noticed too that the acronym for construction in progress is CIP, which we have another acronym.
It is. I saw that as well.
CIP two.
Yeah. Then I was wondering, on the, top of page 2, it talks about, that if the project significantly increases the functionality of the system or the component of the system, or the project extends the useful life of the asset, for more than at least 1 fiscal year. And then I noticed on point 4 under capitalization policy, the highlighted part is that additions to existing infrastructure assets are only capitalized if the value of the addition exceeds 10% of the infrastructure asset value. So I just didn't see how those two things married up.
Yeah, they're 2 different methodologies. Let me think on that one too and clarify that.
Okay, so, sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Under point 5, it says a physical inventory of assets shall be completed biannually, and I just put to myself, wow, that's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, and all agencies do it. It is part of your annual auditing process.
Right.
So we do undertake it. You are required to have an inventory. It is a lot of work. Usually you hire a third party. We do our inventory of our warehouse inventory annually with staff. But when you do the big physical inventory, you usually use an outside consultant.
So, on inventory, are we gonna go to like a hardware store? Somebody, when we get into real time, okay, these 10 units are used over here, so it automatically deducts from the inventory?
We do that now.
We do that now?
But you have to go through once a year and verify the inventory.
No, I understand that. So you see the discrepancies.
Yeah, you see discrepancies. So currently, and we're struggling a little bit with the transition between the current ERP Pentimation to the upgraded Central Square. The old version had a lot of these kind of off-book, special coded programs that were written in-house to help with a variety of different tasks. With the warehouse, we were also using a third-party software that essentially provided a platform for the scanners to speak to the new system. And we're working through some issues with that transition because the software company that wrote the software that allows scanners to talk to the new Central Square, they don't apparently get along. So we're having to figure out a workaround. But, we have a significant amount of inventory, so it does take a lot of time to manage it.
So I have, on the paragraph above point 9, it talks about exceptions for, making a CIP inactive after 12 months of no activity. And I just wondered about, it seemed to me that we had situations where the pandemic and supply chain issues also were the cause of keeping something current, because it really was still a work in progress. So I just didn't want to know if you wanted some kind of broader caveat
or other conditions as may develop. Something.
Yeah, I think we should, because you're correct in that the supply chain issues now are causing havoc.
The project on the CIP has been there for 4 years.
So a project could be on the capital list versus being in construction of projects, yeah, progress.
And then out of curiosity, I was thinking about if you hire an outside consulting firm, I'm assuming that 100% of that contract could be capitalized if it's adding value to, like the Scotts Flat spillway.
Yes, you do in construction of project progress, you do include those environmental permitting consultants, construction inspection, design, all of that. What you don't include is all of the previous planning effort that got you to the decision to do Scotts Flat. That is just general operations of business. It really needs to be tied to the assets of the value of the actual asset. There was a lot of things that were being capitalized here that were these big sweeps of lots of ancillary items that weren't necessarily directly tied to the asset value. So we're fixing that.
So if we do the construction project internally,
We still capitalize it.
we capitalize that our labor, okay? Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for working on this. This is a really important policy, and wasn't top of my list, but it certainly.
Well, this is, this was, came from Stephanie and Debbie, and this is one of those things that is kind of runs in the background, but it's really, really important. It'll make us more efficient, and we'll not be capitalizing pencils anymore. We had a little bit of a mess, so this will be.
Well, that's our work.
Yeah, it will cut our work, make things more straightforward. It'll be better. So this is one of those things that's not very fun, but needed.
When will we see the procurement policy?
Pretty soon. It's pretty much done. We're just kind of looking at right now, federal requirements. There's a different set of federal requirements for procurement, and we want to kind of set it up for any future federal projects.
Any more, board comment? Any member of the public like to comment on this new board policy of capitalization, starting on your phone, step to the podium? Last chance. If you'd like to comment today? All right. Thank you, Jennifer. Next item is general manager's report.
General manager's report. I just had a couple of really quick items. One was related to the Bear River cleanup. We're doing in honor of Circle's annual event. That will be on September 15th from 8 to 10 a.m. So please join us in the public too. It'll be super fun. We're going to break our last year record. Tomorrow we have a 2x2 with NID and PCWA. Jenna's been
I sent a note and just asked if I could attend that as a listener.
It's typically not a great idea.
Okay.
Yeah. But
Zoom it.
is it Zoom? I'm not sure.
It's not a Zoom?
It's not typically
It's
Zoom.
always in person.
Yeah.
That's okay.
We'll do a good report out.
Okay.
Okay. We can I'll take lots of notes.
Okay.
I will be presenting to SIR, so that SIR is, seniors in retirement. Yeah, on, September 17th. So I'm looking forward to that. That will be a great group of people. In Nevada County, somewhere, I'm not sure.
Seniors in
Seniors in retirement, it's a men's club. Yeah. Yeah, it's typically a men's club. They have like different offshoots, and they usually have some type of weekly or monthly lunch and a speaker. Yeah, it'll be fun. Then we're gonna do the plan for water on September 13th. So third meeting of strategic planning, super fun. And water update is on the website, so we weren't gonna go through it. There's no big changes. And we'll cut it short and sweet because it's already new.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. Board of Directors items report. Go first. Okay.
I met with Barbara Bashel with NCPA, and I also met with Carol Young with Rincon Del Rio, so they're moving forward with that development slower than they would like, but still very hopeful for a positive outcome.
And then Ricky and I had the pleasure of doing a presentation for the Nevada County Women's Democratic Club, and we did it on kind of the state of our reservoirs, climate change, and then the bigger challenges facing the district. And we had probably about
50? I think it was 50 folks there.
attendees, and 2 people have requested follow-up presentations, which we'll engage others in. And but we really got tremendous positive feedback, and it was a real fun opportunity to be able to present with Ricky.
Mm-hmm.
Readers?
Yes. I've spent wonderful time up on the Oregon coast these last several days. Cool weather. So I have a concern about the lack of financial reporting. The 2022 budget was never completed to include the management overview information and the summary of our reserve statuses, just a staff report. It's not it's not a summary. We kept saying there was going to be a summary on it. And we haven't received a budget to actual yet for the first or second quarter of this year. We didn't conduct a mid-year budget review. Our capital improvement project review is 10 to 20% complete, and we still haven't seen the audited financials for 2021 or the reconciled 2021 expenses. And so it seems like we're kind of behind on keeping up with the state of the finances of the district. That concerns me. I'm just letting you know my concern. And surplus water sales. In May 26th, we delegated to the general manager to develop rules and regulations for surplus water sales. And I wonder if we're going to see those rules and regulations. Are we going to be able to see those before they're implemented?
There has been no surplus water sale. So we will deal with any surplus only to the 2 cities that we always sell water to, Spence Valley.
In Spencerville, they didn't get any water or anything?
There's a few others, but
They're very minor. Yeah, there's been nothing done.
Normal ones are
We
getting.
made a declaration of surplus in
We
the
did.
drought packet for this year. Yeah. So it's been completed for this year.
Yep.
Okay, that's my concern. Enjoy the strategic planning.
Director Heck. Okay, thank you. Well, I really enjoyed our participation in the Nevada County Fair and the opening ceremonies, and Chris Stepanian, our board secretary, doing the, several songs that were fabulous, and she helped open the fair, and it was lovely to be there as part of the community. And then
I'm proud to see the NID blue.
yeah, we had the NID blue well represented there. And then I went ahead and volunteered at the Farm Bureau booth and had really a great time. It was really fun. We got some new folks to sign up, and kind of the woman and I who are working it. We're working it. No, we had a good time. It was really great. And then just to piggyback on what Karen said about what we're calling our road show, I have a couple of concerns, and so. It was wildly successful, wonderfully received, and we've got all this positive feedback, and people want us to continue the roadshow, right? And so what we have done, I'm just really letting the board know, what we have done is we've provided our roadshow to Jennifer, and hopefully she'll share it with Chip, I don't know, and, just filter for accuracy, thematic, consistency with board policy, those kinds of things, so we make sure, it's like a check and balance thing, because, we put this together and worked really hard and did our thing, everybody loved it, and went, oh, we haven't really shared this with anybody. So maybe that's a good idea.
Well, it was put together on Thursday, so.
But
No, we worked on it much longer than
those
just.
are the best ones.
Yeah, and it did turn out really good, but we're getting requests for everybody to know. We had a request from a group in Rich's division, so now we have it's like, well, Karen, I can't do it with Rich because that would be 3 of us, so now we're going to have to work all of that out.
And they're asking specific questions.
And they're asking some really specific questions that really were beyond the scope of our roadshow presentation. So we're asking for some guidance from our general manager and Chip. Yeah.
Yeah, so we
I
will,
mean, we can talk about
it looks great, we haven't reviewed it in depth, but we'll take a closer look at it
Yeah,
and provide
thank you.
feedback.
Yeah, because we do have to get back to those folks down in Wildwood.
Okay.
It was fun.
It was.
I loved it.
Opportunity to educate people on a lot of stuff.
Well,
A lot of
yeah.
stuff, I mean, we take for granted every day that they don't.
Well, you know, from our strategic planning last night, one of the things our table came up with was the continuing public outreach and education. And that's really important to me, because what I saw in our presentation that Karen and I did was so many folks had no idea about so many aspects of NID. And so, you know, I feel real committed to continuing to do those. I think it was really useful.
It's critical.
And, yeah, and so it's kind of building, you know, off it. So anyhow, we share our little dog and pony show with any of you that want to have it,
Sure.
right? Yeah.
And it's good to have those questions beforehand, that you can have the
Yeah.
right person show up, the right answer, so.
Yeah. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay. Director Johansson?
Yeah, so, attended two meetings, one with Greg and Cameron about, wildland fires. And basically, there's a group out of Idaho University, San Jose State University, and someone, Dr. Carrie Levine, who lives here in Nevada City. They can model how severe a fire will be. And it's amazing, you know, they're dealing with evacuation routes, sites, where do you go when you get out of there, that type of deal. We're looking at the fact that how secure and fire safe are some of our facilities. And so my goal was to say, hey, if we're doing fuel reduction on our canals, our facilities, how fire safe are they when a certain fire comes through? And they can they can do heat, wind, all different models. What kind of became really apparent early on was CAL FIRE doesn't really recognize too many sheltered places at all, because in certain areas, we'll go down to the golf course. So these modelers said, well, yeah, now you got safe separation to deal with. Really don't have it at a golf course. So there, it was like, oh, we're going Wildwood, well, we'll go in the lake. Well, boats still burn up. And it's a really, it was an eye-opener that the fuel reduction, the effort to get to the fuel reduction where you feel you're going to be safe is monumental and expensive. And, but it has to be done. So segue into, probably go to a meeting tonight at the Penn Valley Fire Department, because the Rough and Ready Fire Department is having financial problems. And everybody's looking for a solution. But that, here it comes, folks, that increases the demand for more water into Rough and Ready.
Almost made it.
Almost got
it.
Always willing to please. But what we're also seeing is that a lot more wells are going dry. Met with several property owners yesterday, and thank you, Chip, for responding to their needs. People were using a certain fire hydrant. Whenever they did, no water pressure on top, and they were just taking the water. And these property owners notified us, and it was great. And so they got, hopefully the problems taken care of about water pressure. But in that area, the wells are going dry. And a number of them have connected to NID, a number haven't. So they're going to do more of a survey.
They might need some water line extension?
Yes.
Okay, just checking.
And the customers, the treated water customers that didn't have, or water customers were tapping into our hydrant?
No,
No,
water tenders.
they're getting water deliveries from water tenders. The water tenders had an account, but were not utilizing, for the most part. There's one who didn't, not utilizing the proper hydrant.
And if they're using the wrong hydrant, all the water pressure above just goes.
It's creating a water pressure issue.
Yeah. And we couldn't monitor who gets up and uses that one. And so a lot of people in the area have been watching. Who are they? And these guys they're gutsy. They saw two drivers and chased them off at one time. I wouldn't do it. And so we told them, just don't. Just report it. So otherwise, farming looks pretty good, but there's, Sacramento Valley's looking at more subsidence, and they're trying to have a program here. 400 more wells go dry in a certain area, so they've tapped into Orland.
In Orland.
So they've tapped into a state program where the state's paying, or paying for water deliveries.
Millions of dollars during the drought, the state paid.
Huge. And I'm not sure these wells are gonna come back because, there was more, but,
Thank you, Rich. My report is also, attended the fair, with Vicky, and, we did the same thing in the Farm Bureau booth, to be able to answer questions about Farm Bureau and NID at the same time, so that was fun. And, maybe we can expand that a little bit, since those booths over there are, I believe, they're free because they're, that's what I heard, those spots are free.
We're gonna be at the Gold Country Fair?
What's that?
We're gonna go to the Gold Country Fair?
I think the fair already occurred, didn't it?
Placer County Fair.
Placer County still going?
Yeah, it's coming,
The Gold Country's in Auburn.
the Auburn,
Yeah.
the Placer County happened, Auburn.
Placer County happened.
Placer County happened.
We had no plans to go to the Gold Country Fair.
Right, and we didn't actually have an NID booth
didn't have an NID,
at the Nevada County Fair. It was just, we volunteered and we piggybacked on the Farm Bureau.
Oh, we didn't get any banners or anything?
No, we didn't.
they were gracious enough to share.
There was people asking, especially since they're combined with,
RCD.
And RCS or RCD.
RCD.
Because they have overlap questions about water and ponds and stuff, so that was pretty fun.
It was a good educational opportunity.
And that's my report. Next, next, we're gonna take public comment on items to be considered in closed session. If anybody in the public would like to comment on items to be considered in closed session, this time start on your phone or up to the podium.
Mr. President, I do not expect any reportable action coming out of closed session.
Okay, we don't expect any reportable action coming out of closed session, okay? Last chance to comment. All right, we will adjourn the open session, open the closed session.
We're not gonna